This is Trial Transcripts Exposed by Crime in Court with Heather. Raw courtroom reads with my commentary. Let's dive in. Hi everyone, welcome back to Crime in Court with Heather. This is Trial Transcripts Exposed. We are reading through the Menendez brothers' second trial. First trial ended in a mistrial. Second trial, there was no video, so all we have are the transcripts. And we are comparing the first trial to the second trial. So far, we've noticed that it's been very different. The way evidence has been coming in has been different. The way that we have the defense now, Ms. Abramson cannot do the cross or did not do the direct examination of Erik Menendez. And so we lost that kind of like connection that the two of them had, that gentleness that she had with him. So that was missing. And still a lot of the sexual abuse stuff has not come in. So, and we're going to learn throughout the next few weeks here, there's going to be a lot of arguments because they are still arguing what evidence can come in and what evidence they don't want in the trial. So, with that being said, let us actually first, before we get started, let's do our member thank yous. So we have founding members. Actually, let's start with this. We have two levels of membership. First level is 99 cents. You can become a core insider. At the second level, you can become a justice insider, and there you can receive lots of benefits, including, or perks, I guess you should say, perks, including your name being read on screen in every video. So with that, oh, and then Justice Insiders from now until June 30th, if you join as a Justice Insider, you will get the special designation as a founding Justice Insider. So with that being said, thank you to our founding Justice Insiders, Toyota Girl 67, SLB 29488. May the force be with you. 4313, thank you. Jessica Wienand 6079, Mrs. Apples 2007, Butler 89833, Brooke JF, Jen P 773, Boom Chickawawa 1, and Kendall B 5757. Thank you all for your founding memberships. You too could be a founding member, like I said, if you join as a Justice Insider between now and June 30th. All right, let's get started here with our transcript readings. So we left off. Where did we leave off? We left off Friday, whatever it was. This just says Monday, January, and there's no date on here. This is January 8th. Okay. So we left off the Friday before. This is now Monday. They had a heated argument, if you recall, at the end of the day. Ms. Abramson was like, I don't want to talk to you, Judge. It's kind of funny. She had enough of him. And we were getting a lot of rulings in favor of the prosecution. The judge was being a tight ass, not even seeing any points that Ms. Abramson had to make in her arguments. So anyways, let's get started now. It's a new day. Let's hope everyone's in a better mood. Oh, and we're going to have a new witness. I forgot to mention, we're going to have a new witness who is Virginia Lord. I believe she was in the first trial as well. Yes. But due to scheduling purposes and whatnot, they need to break for a minute with Erik. So we're going to start with Virginia. Also, she is a neighbor, if I recall correctly. So Mr. Gessler says, Your Honor, we have a witness, Virginia Lord, that we would ask to take out of order. This is the witness that we told the court about on Friday. There is no objection. The court says, let's have the jury out and we'll proceed with that witness. Jury enters the courtroom. Court says, I'm trying to keep track of who does and doesn't have a beard here. So is there a constant or a contest going on? What are people like changing up their facial hair? It's been weeks, Your Honor. People do different things with their facial hair, I'm sure, in the months that this trial is taking. Alternate juror number 4 says, for the record, I had one first. Oh, I guess everyone's growing beards now. The court says the record will reflect the jury is in court. I thought he was going to say the record will reflect juror number 4 had the beard first. That would have been funny. But I guess not. He says, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're ready to resume with the trial. They're going to stop for a moment with the testimony of Erik Menendez to put on another witness whose schedule won't permit that witness to be here some other time. So we'll have the witness called out of order at this point. Mr. Gessler says, thank you, Your Honor. We call Virginia Lord. Virginia Hilton Lord. She's a Hilton? Is that like a is she a Hilton? She was called as a witness. She was sworn in. The court says, raise your hand, all that stuff. She says her name, Virginia Hilton Lord. Spell your middle and last name, says the clerk. She does. The court says, okay, if you could just speak into that microphone, rotate it down a little bit. The witness says, is that right? Court says, perfect. Speak right into the front of there. Direct examination begins. Mr. Gessler says, Mrs. Lord, do you have a little bit of a hearing problem? Yes, I do. Are you able to hear me now? Yes, I am. Is that a comfortable voice for you to hear me in so that you can answer our questions? Yes, it is. Mrs. Lord, directing your attention to August 20th of 1989. Where did you live at that time? 711 North Elm Drive, Beverly Hills. Can you tell us where that is in relation to 722 North Elm Drive? I believe it is 5 doors south and on the other side of the street. Until the last trial, had you ever seen either Lyle Menendez or Erik Menendez, the defendants in this case? Never, never. So she lived right across the street. Not right. She said 5 doors south and on the other side. So she's on the other side of the street facing them, but 5 doors down. Never seen them before. Since then, you've learned that they lived at 722 North Elm. I certainly have. Directing your attention to the evening of August 20th, 1989, were you at home during that part of the evening? Yes, I was. Do you recall about what time you got home? I went out about 8:30 for dinner by myself and returned at about 9:30. No, before that I went out about 7 and returned about 8. Now during that evening, then after you got home, did you go up to bed at some point? Yes, I did. I went up to bed and began reading. And then did you hear anything that sounded unusual to you? Yes, I did. I heard pop, 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 which I assumed were fireworks. Did you do anything when you heard those noises? I just thought, what crazy kids are lighting fireworks at this time of night on Sunday night? I looked at my clock. It was 10 o'clock. What kind of clock did you have? Asked Mr. Gessler. It was an electric clock. And to the best of your knowledge, did it keep accurate time? It sure had to. Is that the clock you kind of ran your affairs by? When I was in bed, yes. Now, did you have a hearing problem at that time also? Yes, I did. Did you take any actions regarding that hearing problem? Do you have hearing aids? I always wore hearing aids until I went to sleep at night from the time I got up in the morning and still do. That particular night, as you were reading and heard the pop, 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 did you have your hearing aids on or? Yes, I did. Thank you very much. That was it. The court says cross-examination. Ms. Nahara says briefly, Mrs. Lord, how long have you lived in that neighborhood? 35. Well, I've lived there all my life, but 35 years in that particular house. And in all that time that you lived, sorry, hold on. I'm trying to get comfortable. My dog's like right in the spot where my arm would go if I wanted to be comfortable. So I have to be like awkward right now. Um, sorry. And in all that time that you lived on Elm Street, had you ever heard gun fired off in the neighborhood? Never. Would you agree that in that particular neighborhood, shootings aren't a daily occurrence? Not even a yearly occurrence. In fact, would you agree it's kind of a non existent occurrence? Yeah, right. And in the past, had you heard popping sounds in the neighborhood before? Yes, because my own children would light fireworks from time to time, and neighbor children would also, not frequently, but once in a while. When your children or the neighbor children lit firecrackers, did they do this at different times of the year? Yes. So it wasn't just limited to the 4th of July. No, it wasn't. When you heard this popping, did you call the police? I didn't even think of calling the police because I thought it was fireworks. And the next day, did you see the police out in the neighborhood? I was interviewed by a detective at 9 in the morning. And did you learn the next day about the shooting in the neighborhood? Well, actually, I heard that night because my husband was out on business and returned about midnight, and he woke me up and said, Come to my front bedroom and see what's out there. Now, did you realize or did you think that the popping that you heard might have been gunshots after you heard about the shooting in the neighborhood? Yes, I did. But before you heard about the shooting in the neighborhood, did you ever suspect that it could be gunshots? Never. And when you heard the popping sounds, could you say where it came from? Can you tell where it came from? No. I was lying in bed and my bathroom is right connecting with my bedroom and the windows were open in the bathroom which faces north towards 722 and I never thought of where it was coming from, but I assume that's where it came from. So the direction of their home, but she wouldn't know necessarily that it was their house. Now, when you say you assume that now, is that right? Yes, after it happened. Before, when you first heard the popping, is it fair to say you really couldn't say where it came from? No, no. Thank you. I have nothing further. Any redirect, says the court. Mr. Gessler says no, Your Honor. The court says, okay, thank you very much. The witness says thank you. That was quick. And the court says, all right, are we ready to resume with the testimony of Erik Menendez? All right, the defendant, Erik Menendez, is back on the witness stand. I'll remind you, you're still under oath. The witness says, yes, Your Honor. Erik takes the stand. Cross-examination may continue, says the court. Mr. Khan says, thank you. All right, Mr. Khan asks, oh, and by the way, we have 2 more days of Erik on the stand, so 4 more episodes. But redirect is going to begin, I believe, in next episode. So cross is about to end, but then we have redirect and recross. But just so you know, we're getting close to the end of Erik's testimony. Mr. Khan says, Mr. Menendez, you indicated that both you and your brother attended a session with Dr. Oziel on November the 2nd of 1989. Is that correct? Yes, sir. And you arrived at that session together and you left together? Yes. And the two of you remained in that session the entire time together? I believe so. Now, was there a discussion at that session between yourself, Dr. Oziel, and Lyle Menendez, which reflected the possibility that Dr. Oziel's ability to piece together what happened in the family constellation in the event that you and your brother were brought to trial would be significant information that would help jurors understand why the murder took place? Objection with respect to the form of the question and the word murder. The question was incredibly confusing I have no, like, as I was reading it, I was just struggling to understand where he was going. So now, I'm going to read it again. Let's try to understand what the hell he's asking. Was there a discussion at that session between yourself, Dr. Oziel, and Lyle Menendez which reflected the possibility that Dr. Oziel's ability to piece together what happened in the family constellation in the event that you and your brother were brought to trial would be significant information that would help jurors understand why the murder took place? So, would Dr. Zeal be able to help jurors understand why the murder took place? That was a very confusing question. I didn't get it at first, just the way that it's worded. The possibility that Dr. Oziel's ability to piece together what happened in the family constellation in the event that you and your brother were brought to trial. What? Speak English. Anyways, moving on. The court says, well, if that was the discussion, then he can answer it. Oh, he followed that. I didn't get it. Okay. If it doesn't track the words that were used, then he can say that. The witness says, I'm not sure. I believe that it was closer to the 11th that we discussed in the session prior to the 11th, around the 6th or the 8th, that he was wanting the tape and giving us different reasons why the tape could be valuable. We would, or we should, make the tape primarily to make him, to be sure he wouldn't go to the police. But I don't believe it was brought up on the 2nd. But it's too long ago to distinguish the time. I don't believe he used those words. Certainly, a trial wasn't talked about. Mr. Khan says, what I'm saying is, at some point in time, was there a discussion between yourselves and Dr. Oziel that one of the purposes for the session, I'm not talking about the tape now, one of the purposes for the session was that Dr. Oziel would have information that would help jurors understand why the killings took place? No, that never took place. No such discussion ever took place. Is that correct? Mr. Levin says, objection, vague with reference as to words such, it requires him to speculate. The court says, why don't you clarify with what that is? Mr. Khan says, yes. Are you saying that you never heard any conversation or you were not present during any conversation with your brother and Dr. Oziel in which there was a discussion about Dr. Oziel having information that could be presented to the jury in the event of your arrest? No, I don't believe so. I mean, you can't get any clearer than that now. The answer is no. So stop asking. Stop asking and hounding him with the same question, which he tends to do. And there was no discussion between yourself or Lyle Menendez or Dr. Oziel that Dr. Oziel was going to collect mitigating details of the background so that these could be brought out in trial? No. And you never had any such discussions with Lyle Menendez either before or after those sessions, is that correct? After December 11th, Lyle never saw Dr. Oziel again, so it couldn't have been after. Okay, so you're saying up until December 11th of 1989, you and your brother Lyle Menendez never discussed anything about Dr. Oziel collecting mitigating details of the background so they could be presented to the jury in the event of your arrest. Objection assumes facts not in evidence that that's what was discussed. Overruled. The witness says, before December 11th, Dr. Oziel was blackmailing us. I certainly did not believe that he could be useful in a trial. I didn't trust him in that sense. I don't understand how you can suggest that. That was a good answer. Mr. Khan says, Dr. Oziel was blackmailing you? In what way? When we inherited, we were going to invest in his companies. And when did he begin to blackmail you? November the 2nd, when we talked about the fact that he was now on disability because he was afraid that he had to file disability, that the money he was getting was not enough and he wanted us to compensate for that. And the way to do it was to invest in his companies because he had these great ideas and they would benefit all of us because the situation would be resolved. How was he even on disability? What was his reason he was threatened? Like, how did he get disability? It takes a long time to get on disability, unless you're like an emergency situation or something. I don't know. I don't even think then. I don't think they do emergency situations. So how long did you continue to see Dr. Oziel after December the 11th? I got to go to Dr. Oziel, or I continued to go, sorry. I continued to go to Dr. Oziel. How long did you continue to see Dr. Oziel until mid-February? Let me finish the question. After the December 11th until mid-February. How often did you see him between December 11th and February? I was supposed to see him once a week. Supposed to? According to who? That's what was set up, that I would go to him once a week. Who set that up? Dr. Oziel. Are you saying that he did this against your will? No, I'm not saying that he did this against my will. I'm saying that was the arrangement that was made. Did you continue to see Dr. Oziel between December 89 and February, of 1990, once a week? Why did you? What did I say? Did I say why did you? I don't even know. My brain just shut off for a second. Why did you continue to see Dr. Oziel from December to February? Because I needed help and I wanted help, and he was the only therapist I knew, and he was the only person that I felt that I could go to at that point who knew what I had done. And you're suggesting he is. The court says, wait, he isn't finished. The witness says, and because one of us had to stay in contact with Dr. Oziel regularly in terms of sessions until the real estate was settled, there were many reasons, but I was mainly focused on the fact that I needed help. Mr. Khan says, are you telling us, Mr. Menendez, that you were going to therapy with a man who you believe was blackmailing you? Objection argumentative is phrased. Overruled. It wasn't a matter of belief. He was, and I was. I mean, he didn't sit down and begin threatening me or doing anything like that. He was just saying that he needed money to compensate for his lack of business now, and that we could invest in him and he would also benefit from that. He said he would get money back and we should just go into business. But I needed help, most importantly, for my severe depression. Did Dr. Oziel ever tell you that he would be helpful at trial to you and your attorney in piecing together the family constellation and explaining the reasons that led to the killing? No. I think that was what he testified to in the first trial. I think that's what Dr. Oziel said, that he would help them, piece this all together and figure out the why of everything. Really, understand everything, why this all happened, which we understand why. And Dr. Oziel wasn't why we understand that. It wasn't until Erik eventually opened up to, I think it was Dr. Stuart Hart, while he was incarcerated. And then eventually that was, um, it was disclosed to Ms. Abramson. Isn't it true, Mr. Menendez, that in your presence on November the 2nd of 1989, Lyle Menendez had a conversation with Oziel in which he initiated the discussion about Dr. Oziel piecing together mitigating information? That's what Lyle initiated? Correct. I don't believe so. Certainly not that I remember. Isn't it true, Mr. Menendez, that Lyle Menendez wanted the mitigating details of the background brought out in those sessions in the event that the two of you were ever arrested? How would Lyle... Your Honor, objection with respect to the questions we asked to approach. The court says, well, the objection is sustained. The answer stricken as to that particular question because it calls for a conclusion on the part of the witness. Mr. Khan says, is it true, Mr. Menendez, that Lyle Menendez wanted the session on December 11th memorialized in some way? Absolutely not. Is it true, Mr. Menendez, that Lyle Menendez wanted or talked about how it would be good to get down on tape all the details to mitigate in some way the severity of the crime that had taken place and to try to explain what had happened. Mr. Levin says, Your Honor. The witness says no. Mr. Levin says, I object to this line of questioning and ask to approach. Mr. Gessler says, I join the objection and ask to approach. Court says the answer stricken, the objections sustained, and we'll have a brief conference. So we're going to have a sidebar. The court says, yes. Mr. Levin says, all these matters are issues which have been denied by Erik Menendez at the last trial, and Mr. Khan has not obtained proof of service, served process on Dr. Oziel, and he's not permitted, as we understand the court's ruling, to go into these areas. The court says, Mr. Khan? Why do you need Mr. Khan to answer? Because he shouldn't be going into, but whatever, I guess you got to have both sides respond. Mr. Khan says, first of all, these are not matters you included in your motion. These are not denials. These are matters outside the scope of the motion. Plus, Dr. Oziel has been served by this time. The court, regardless of that matter, of that latter aspect, should have brought that to. Sorry, I just said the court. I just read that. I'm reading too fast. I need to slow my butt down. Okay. The court says, regardless of that latter aspect, you should have brought that to counsel's and the court's attention before going into it. You're saying these are not matters that Erik Menendez was questioned about in the first trial and stated denials? Mr. Khan says, right, these were not denials. Ms. Abramson says they still have no right to ask them unless they have Oziel prepared to testify. They can only question under the low signal rule as to things the defendant admitted the last time. The court says that's not true. The whole argument you were making was the defendant denied these things in his earlier testimony under oath, and therefore the prosecution shouldn't show a clear good faith belief that evidence would be different this time around without having Oziel available. Ms. Abramson says they can't show he would have ever answered these questions affirmatively and be able to prove them up. The court says that's not the law. The law of cross-examination doesn't mean you have to know the answers, that the answer is going to, what the answer of the witness is going to be before you can answer or ask a question. Otherwise, you would never be able to cross-examine. Ms. Abramson says he's also asking a whole series of questions having to do with statements supposedly made by Lyle Menendez, which, I don't know. Charlie, did Lyle deny them in the last trial? Mr. Gessler says, I don't remember Lyle being asked these particular questions in the last trial. Whether Lyle did or not, Erik is on the witness stand, and I think it is still, in my mind, a low signal violation asking these questions without a good faith belief that the answer would be yes, for which there is no good faith belief. And the questions are aggravated by not just asking him, did Lyle Menendez tell you or say that he wanted this to be done, but to have him ask, did he tell you, Dr. Oziel, that he indicates prosecutorial knowledge to the jury that he did, in fact, tell Dr. Oziel this phantom witness who apparently will never be seen in the courtroom. I think it is the same, and I know we've been through this before, but I renew my objections to this line of questioning under the 6th Amendment and the 14th and the 8th Amendment because I think it's similar to Douglas versus Alabama, in which when you ask a question, did you tell so-and-so on a certain date the following information? The jurors are bound to believe the good faith of the prosecutor that this actually happened and take it as evidence of the fact that it happened. Oops, sorry. The court says, let me inquire. I have no recollection of it. You said you don't believe that your client made denials of this in the first trial? Mr. Gusser says, I hadn't specifically looked at this area of the first trial of Lyle Menendez's testimony on cross. The court says, did he say the opposite maybe? Are you certain he didn't say the opposite? Mr. Gessler says, I'm not certain. The court says, maybe he said, do you have any idea what Lyle Menendez said on that subject? Mr. Khan says, yes. Two of the questions I already asked were words right out of Lyle Menendez's mouth in the first trial. He said, Dr. Oziel said he was going to collect all mitigating details of the background so that in the event that we got arrested, these details could be brought out. That is straight. Ms. Abramson says, that was not the question you were asking. Mr. Khan says, will you wait a minute? That is right out of the mouth of Lyle Menendez. That is one of the questions I asked. Ms. Abramson says, you keep asking the. Mr. Khan says, will you wait a minute and let me finish? The court says, one person at a time. Mr. Khan says, that is one of the questions I asked Erik Menendez here. Some of the other questions are words right out of the mouth of Dr. Oziel from the first trial. The other question that came directly out of the mouth of Lyle Menendez from the first trial is when I said, did Dr. Oziel say to you that he could be helpful at trial to you and your attorney in piecing together the family constellation and explain the reasons that led to the killings? So at least the court says, what was the answer? Mr. Khan says, yes, Lyle Menendez admitted to both of those. The court says, these are sessions when Oziel and Lyle Menendez and Erik Menendez were also present? Yes, on November 2nd. Ms. Abramson says, I think part of the problem, frankly, Mr. Khan, is that you didn't ask the question whether it could be useful in the future. You constantly are asking him to present to a jury. The court says he's entitled to phrase it in different ways. Ms. Abramson says, I understand, but he might get the answer he's looking for if he simply asks the question differently. The court says that's possible. He can do it his way. On redirect, you can do it or don't do it. It seems to me, first of all, as to those questions, clearly, if they were the subject of testimony from Lyle Menendez in the first trial, and there is this offer tantalized by Erik Menendez of introducing Lyle Menendez's testimony, that by itself is supported by the record. Ms. Abramson says, until we do introduce Lyle Menendez's testimony, I don't believe it's appropriate. If the people have now opened the door so that Mr. Gessler may now be able to introduce Lyle Menendez's testimony, the court says, no, that's clearly never going to happen. Ms. Abramson says, wait a minute. If they are quoting testimony of Lyle Menendez, and the only way they can do that is prior recorded testimony, and they're trying to introduce these sections as things that Lyle Menendez testified to before, then there is a real 356 issue. The court says, put that on your wish of things that you hope sometime in the future world might occur, but not in this first trial. What? Mr. Gessler says, then, Your Honor, in case that is not the people's proposition as to how to prove up the truth of this particular statement, that leaves Dr. Oziel, and if they are now pronouncing that they will call Dr. Oziel, then the Los Signo problem is, I guess, obviated. But if they are not saying they are going to call Dr. Oziel to give the converse of these statements being denied by Erik, I renew my Los Signo violation motions on all the grounds, federal and state, that I had previously cited. The court says, okay, just to say, once again, these were statements made, if Mr. Khan's recollection is correct, by Lyle Menendez in the first trial. I don't see in any way that this is a Los Signo situation of bad faith. Ms. Abramson says they couldn't prove it up. They can't call Lyle Menendez. The court says, you say you're going to call him. Ms. Abramson says, we're trying to thrash that out with the court, so we're not, so far we're not able to. The court says they certainly have the opportunity to cross-examine your client. Ms. Abramson says, I withdraw my motion to call Lyle Menendez as a witness. If this is a game, the court says, you're playing. Ms. Abramson says, you put such constraints on the way in which we are able to actually, we haven't made a decision. Therefore, I withdraw the request at this time if its only purpose now is being used so that my client can be presented with hearsay of Lyle Menendez's prior testimony, which his lawyer doesn't even have a 356 right to explain in context. So the fact that she says she might be calling or Lyle, or she might be using his testimony from the first trial, they're using that as a weapon against them. She hasn't put it in yet into evidence, so technically he shouldn't be asking about it, but the court is kind of letting him. This is also backwards. Everything's like in a circle. Like, you shouldn't do this, but you have to have this happen before you can do that. And the defense is hands are tied with like everything here. So she withdraws the motion at this time if its only purpose now is to be used against my client. With hearsay of Lyle Menendez's prior testimony, which his lawyer doesn't even have a 356 right to explain in context. I don't care about games. I care about fairness. The people should not be able to bring out what they choose to select from Lyle Menendez's prior testimony, which my client was not asked to sign on to or not sign on to in his prior testimony, and use that for their purposes while still trying to prevent us from putting on the Lyle Menendez testimony in the form that we had wanted to. Fine, I withdraw the motion now. The court says if you withdraw that motion for all time, that might change my view, but I don't think you're saying that. At this point, I don't see there's any bad faith in the way the prosecution asked those questions. Wow. He's going to let it all in. Again, he's just going to side with the prosecution this whole trial. So, what the hell's the point of having a judge who's supposed to be fair and calling for both sides? He says, I don't see there's any need to rectify anything. There's nothing improper that has occurred. They certainly had good faith in the nature of those questions. As far as going beyond that for things that Oziel testified about that were denied by both defendants, did you intend to or have you already gone into that? Mr. Khan says, the questions I'm asking now are simply questions in which there has not been denial from Erik Menendez. Ms. Abramson says, we still want to see some proof Oziel has been served. The court says, if you go into anything beyond what we're areas not covered on earlier testimony, where there were no denials, if you go into areas where there are denials, then we want to have a hearing before you do that. Mr. Khan says, okay, I'll do that. As I pointed out last week, one of the issues, I'm not intending to go in any of the areas in which there have been denials. This is the one area. Court says, we've already ruled on that. Mr. Khan says, okay. Court says, let's proceed. Ms. Abramson says, there will still be objections, however, to questions framed in terms of conclusions of what Lyle Menendez wanted. The court says, if you could phrase these things in a way that doesn't ask for him to read Lyle Menendez's mind, it would make more sense. Ms. Abramson says, one other thing, we would object to Mr. Khan indicating that Lyle Menendez testified to any of these things in the prior trial. Mr. Khan says, I'm not going to do that. The court says he hasn't done that. All right, so sidebar. Yeah, sidebar over. No, I don't know. It says following proceedings were resumed in open court, so they are no longer at a bench. Sidebar. Now they're back in open court. Ms. Abramson says, Your Honor, may we have a moment? The court says, sure. Ms. Abramson says, we'd ask to approach again. The court says, okay. Ms. Abramson says, with the transcript from the prior trial. The court says, this time, let's take a break where we can have a little better opportunity to talk about it, and the jurors will have had a chance to go to the jury room. The jury exits, and now they're going to have a longer discussion about this. The court says the jury has left. Apparently, there's some dispute as to citations of the record in the first trial. Mr. Khan, what are the citations that you are referring to? So they went back and looked at a transcript, I think. Ms. Abramson says, yes, right. Mr. Khan says, for Dr. Oziel. The court says, no, for the testimony of Lyle Menendez. Ms. Abramson says, I'd like the reporter just to put it into context to read back the questions that Mr. Khan says. The court says one thing at a time here. Just give me the transcripts. Do you have the citations to the transcripts? Mr. Khan says, yes. The transcript is volume 89, and the pages are 14766 and 14767. The court says 13776, 766. Okay. The court says, I guess counsel don't have it other than in their computer. I'll get mine in chambers. That sounds like a total boomer uh comment. Like, I don't know where it is. Is it in the computer? Ms. Abramson says, I think it's important to read back the question because we think the question was phrased that Mr. Lyle Menendez was suggesting or asking or requesting this for this purpose, and that is not what was testified to. The court says, we'll let the reporter find the questions asked by Mr. Khan on that subject, and I'll get volume 89. Ms. Abramson says, thank you, Your Honor. The record was read. The court says, what page again are you talking about? 147? Ms. Abramson says 14766 to 14767. There's a pause in the proceedings. The court says, okay, are you ready to discuss the matter? Ms. Abramson says, yes, Your Honor, we are. If I can have, because I have the collective memory here. I think it's obvious from reading these pages that the questions that Mr. Khan has been asking are not being made in good faith. Lyle Menendez did not testify that he initiated a discussion with Oziel concerning piecing together mitigation. There's no indication that Lyle wanted to have Oziel operate in that capacity or that Lyle wanted the mitigating details collected. What he's testifying to apparently is that Oziel said he could be useful in the November 2nd session, and that Oziel, in the event they're arrested, he would know about these mitigating things in the family constellation. That's Oziel talking. So once again, the prosecution is twisting something in the case and making it seem like the brothers are more guilty when, in fact, it wasn't even them at all that were talking about it. Emerson continues, and the mischief of this line of questioning is that that's Oziel talking on November 2nd when we know from Oziel's total testimony that his position is that he was afraid and wanted to make some kind of alliance with the defendants in order to deal with his own fears. He was trying to make himself look useful to help, and that's him talking and pitching. Even if we accept his theory of why Oziel, in order to make himself seem useful so they wouldn't kill him, that also plays into our client's position that this is all part of his package of selling himself to them in exchange for $14 million. As he pointed out to Judalon Smith, there's $14 million involved here. The bottom line here is the questions being asked of Erik Menendez are not being asked in good faith. That is not what Lyle Menendez testified to. He testified instead that this was Oziel's idea, and he may have testified he went along with it, but we're talking about going along with the discussion that's happening on November 2nd. And what Mr. Khan wants to do is take this distorted version of that discussion and try and argue that that's what was in Lyle Menendez's mind on the making of the December 11th tape, and we think that's improper. As we know, Oziel was never asked any questions about the making of the December 11th tape, and neither were the defendants in the first trial. There was no discussion of what the purpose of that was in that trial, and therefore, what Mr. Khan is trying to do is take a discussion on November 2nd and what's going to happen on November 2nd or at some other period of time, but not pegged to December 11th, and use that to explain what was happening on December 11th. Moreover, he's also asking specific questions. Well, never mind. I take that back. The court says, okay, Mr. Gessler, did you want to be heard, or are you submitting it on the argument of Ms. Abramson? Mr. Gessler says, I join in the argument of Ms. Abramson. I think that states the point as well as what was said in the hall. The court says you're correct. During the trial, the testimony of the defendants and Oziel before the jury did not touch upon the December 11th session. Therefore, the prosecution has a right to cross-examine the way they deem most effective on that subject. They have no idea what the defendant's answers would be until they ask the questions. They have no opportunity to take a deposition of the defendants. They're not required to rely upon the representations of counsel as to what a defendant would or would not say. They have a right to cross-examine on this subject, and it's certainly a fair question to ask if this was something discussed on November the 2nd by Oziel without the preface that it was discussed by Oziel on November the 2nd. What? That's so confusing. It's certainly proper to then explore whether or not those discussions were on the mind of the participants on December 11th when that tape session occurred. And as to how those questions are structured and the manner of the questioning, that's certainly up to the questioner and not for the court to dictate how the questions should be asked. I don't find this in any way bad faith. This is appropriate cross examination on a subject that the prosecution has no way of knowing what the defendant's answers will be until they ask the questions. It's improper because first of all, they're using a witness that they should have gotten this in through Dr. Oziel. They should have brought him in the first place, and this is their way to bypass bringing in a bad witness, a terrible witness, to get the information across. Ms. Abramson says, our position, Your Honor, is if he's proceeding by way, certainly he's free to cross examine in an open way instead of giving the clear impression of doing what he is doing, which is relying on previous hearsay that he's misrepresenting. So he's even misrepresenting what was said in court, but he shouldn't even be relying on what was said in court. He should be asking open-ended questions. If he wants to ask, was there a discussion or anything about a discussion about Oziel collecting mitigating things, that's one thing, but he tells us, Mr. Khan does, that justification for asking the question is because either Lyle Menendez so testified in the first trial, and now we see that's not accurate. So he's misrepresenting and saying Lyle said this when in reality he didn't. Or Oziel so testified in the first trial, and you understand our objections to that. So we're not talking about being able to cross-examine on a subject matter. I agree with the court. He's free to cross-examine on any relevant subject matter. It's the fact he's framing it in such a way as to give the impression to the jury that he's quoting somebody when he isn't quoting somebody. He's misrepresenting what somebody has said. The court says, I don't find that's the nature of the questioning. This court is so crooked. He continues on and says, I think it's proper questioning and doesn't infer or cause anyone to infer that there's any other testimony on the record from other proceedings that would contradict what the answers are here. All right, anything else then before we proceed? Let's get the jury out. So once again, the court rules in favor of the prosecution. All right, let's get back to cross-examination. The court says the jury is back. You may continue your cross-examination. Mr. Khan says, thank you. Is it true, Mr. Menendez, that in the November the 2nd session, Lyle Menendez talked about how it would be good to get down on tape all the details to mitigate in some way the severity of the crime that had taken place to explain what had happened? No. Mr. Levin says objection argumentative is phrased. Overruled. The witness says never. Mr. Khan says, is it true, Mr. Menendez, that there was an understanding in that November the 2nd session that Dr. Oziel would do this so that if you were brought to trial, he could be a witness? Objection calls for a conclusion, speculation. The court says, are you asking whether it was the witness's understanding? Mr. Khan says, yes. The court says, okay, with that clarification, what is your answer? The witness says, no. Mr. Khan says, is it true, Mr. Menendez, that Dr. Oziel was going to put together the factors, including hatred, that may have led to the killings in this case? Objection calls for a conclusion and speculation. The court says, rephrase the question. Mr. Khan says, was there a discussion as to whether Dr. Oziel would put together the factors, including the hatred, that could have led to the killings in this case? Mr. Levin says, objection assumes facts, not an evidence. Overruled. Ms. Abramson says, excuse me, Your Honor. The witness says, it would be impossible. Ms. Abramson says, excuse me, Your Honor. The attorneys confer. Mr. Levin says, Your Honor, additionally, I object under 402. The court says, let me have the question read back, please. It was read, which was... Was there a discussion as to whether Oziel would put together the factors, including the hatred, that could have led to the killings in this case? So that was read back. The court says, objection sustained to the form of the question. The answer is stricken. Mr. Khan says, is it true, Mr. Menendez, that on November 2nd of 1989, there was an agreement among Dr. Oziel, Lyle Menendez, and yourself that it would be a good idea for Dr. Oziel to go ahead and do this? Objection vague. The court says, do what? Mr. Khan says, in other words, put together mitigating factors in the event that you were arrested. No, says Erik. Mr. Khan says, and at no time did you ever discuss with your brother Lyle Menendez, Dr. Oziel doing this, is that correct? Objection vague. Clarify this, says the court. Yes. At no time up until and including the December 11th session was there any discussion between yourself and Lyle Menendez that Dr. Oziel would be collecting mitigating factors of the background in the event that you were arrested. Those details could be brought out. No, says Erik. All right, getting back, Mr. Menendez, to the discussion that you had with Dr. Oziel on December 11th. Do you recall in that discussion with Dr. Oziel saying that you really couldn't bond with your mother? Not specifically, no. Well, is it true, Mr. Menendez, that you really couldn't bond with your mother? Oh, I know what you're saying. Mr. Levin says, objection with respect to bonding. The court says, all right. Mr. Levin says, based on our previous arguments. The court says, you're referring to the December 11th tape. Is that correct? Mr. Khan says, yes. The court says, do you have a quotation in mind? Mr. Khan says, yes. Would you then refer to that? Says the court. The objection is sustained to the last question. The answer is stricken. Mr. Khan says, do you recall Dr. Oziel saying to you, the court says, what page and line? Page 1, Your Honor. This is line 25, 24 to 26, says Mr. Khan. Do you recall Dr. Oziel saying to you, I mean, you couldn't really bond either of you with your mom because of what happened with your mom in terms of all the separation. Do you recall that being asked? I think if you could show me what it says there, please. Well, he was saying that my mother was not capable. Okay, so I guess he saw it because he continues on saying, well, he was saying that my mother was not capable of bonding and not capable of loving because of what happened, partly because of what happened in her own childhood by her being molested. Do you remember? I'm going to make a motion to strike as non-responsive. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel has a question. The answer should stand. The court says, well, let's hear what the question was that related to whether he remembered Dr. Oziel saying this. As I recall, let's have the question read back. The court said it was read back. The court says, all right, to the objection, or the objection to the answer then is sustained. It was non-responsive, of course. The question had to do with whether or not this was said by Oziel on December 11th. The witness says yes. Mr. Khan says, and is it true, Mr. Menendez, that you couldn't really bond with your mother? I just want to go back and say that's really bogus because what happened was he didn't want that coming in, the fact that Kitty Menendez was molested in her childhood. So he was about to go on to another question. He almost passed right over it. And then he was like, oh, wait, motion to strike is non-responsive. And then, of course, his little buddy, sidekick, helper friend, the judge, was like, sure, strike it. I don't want the jury to remember that Kitty Menendez was molested in her childhood to make her a little developmentally challenged when it comes to, psychologically. That would explain a lot of her, panic attack type violent rages that she would have and things of that nature. So it would make a whole lot more sense. And I don't think they even got into that a whole lot in this trial yet, that she was violent. Mr. Levin says, objection, Your Honor. Okay. So it was objected to, which I thought was BS. Mr. Khan says, is it true, Mr. Menendez, that you couldn't really bond with your mother? Objection, Your Honor, based on our previous discussions. Overruled, says the court. Erik says, no, I loved my mother, and I believed that she loved me, and we bonded in a sense. That wasn't always communicated because she didn't really know how to express her feelings or communicate through words. So, Mr. Menendez, at any time when he was telling you something about your mother, which you believed to be untrue, did you correct him and say, Dr. Oziel, you're wrong? I did have a bond with my mother? No. And is that because you agreed with him, Mr. Menendez? You had no bond with your mother? No. Now, do you remember Dr. Oziel asking you, or do you remember Dr. Oziel saying during that interview that your mother didn't trust you ultimately? If you take it out of context like that, I don't understand what you're saying. If you read the paragraph, then it will become clear why what is being said is being said. So you're saying, at least at this point in time, you don't recall Dr. Oziel saying to you that your mother didn't trust you ultimately. Is that correct? Ms. Abramson says, where is the site, Your Honor? The court says, I think the defendant has read it because it was part of the same paragraph that was shown to him. The witness says, right, right. I read that in the paragraph. Yes. Mr. Khan says, do you remember Dr. Oziel saying to you that your mother didn't trust you ultimately? I don't recall it, but he did say it. And when did you agree with him when he said that to your mother? Didn't trust you when you said, let me read that again. Did you agree with him when he said that your mother didn't trust you ultimately? He wasn't referring to didn't trust me as a person. Sorry, I don't know what she was barking at. Um, he wasn't referring to didn't trust me as a person. He was referring to something else. Now, the self unaliving note that you said that you found relating to your mother, where did you find that? Yeah, where did you find that note? In her dresser, under a book. It was in her dresser in her bedroom? Yes. Inside a drawer? Yes. And was it, the court says, what was that? A drawer? Mr. Khan says, a drawer. The court says, do you need some time? Unidentified juror says, could I have a minute? The court says, sure, sure. The court says, all right. And you found the letter under a book. Is that correct? Says Mr. Khan. Yes, sir. What were you doing looking through her dresser? It's where a lot of books were kept in this particular dresser, and I was looking in there for a book and I came across this letter. She didn't leave that out in the open where you could find it, did she? It was under the book on a shelf of books. Inside a drawer. Is that correct? Yes. Now, do you remember the following question from Dr. Oziel and referring counsel's attention to page 4, line 16, question by Dr. Oziel? Dr. Oziel says, "Well, when you ended up killing your mom, did you feel like you were sparing her? I know she was horribly depressed and she was totally dominated by your dad. She was like a shell of a person. She had no identity or strength left anymore. You had been I know that you had been responding to her as I think almost like a person that becomes sort of pitiful. Now that that's a strong word, but is that how you felt? Do you remember that question being asked of you, Mr. Menendez? Yes. And was it your intention to answer that question truthfully? Well, it was the agreement that that is what happened, and the answer to that question would be, to his question, would be yes. What do you mean that that was the agreement that that was what happened? What we had discussed since November 2nd, why we believed this happened, and he believed that the only thing that made sense was that my mother was asking for someone to kill her because of her depression and wanting to take her own life. And before the statement began, this is what we had agreed to talk about before the taping began. Well, you're saying that there was an agreement with Dr. Oziel on December the 11th. Yes, sir. What did you agree to before the tape began? We went over in that hour before the taping began why again my mother was killed. It was very unclear why dad was, but that this was something where she no longer wanted to live and we were supposed to bring in experiences that bolstered that and talk about her depression, which is primarily what the tape is about. Did Dr. Oziel tell you this is what I want you to say on the tape? That's what he's saying there. He's saying, here, this is what I want you to say. No, but that's why he brings in, were you sparing her? Because he had already been because that had already been discussed before, and it was something that he didn't say on the tape recording. This is what I want you to say, does he? Do you think he would? Eric says no, of course. Dr. Oziel never told you this is what I want you to say, did he? Objection, vague as to time, overruled. Eric says, he told me that this is why it happened and this is what happened. And he said that it took courage to do that and that it was something that we had to do because she was asking no longer to live and that we may not understand or realize really how horrible my mother's life was at that moment. What kind of a quack is this guy to be saying these horrible things? He told the brothers that you had to do it because she didn't want to live anymore. She had such an utterly miserable life with you that she didn't want to live anymore. But through more therapy, it would become clear how much she wanted to be killed. So you need more therapy with this quack to get to the root of why she wanted to not live anymore. Awesome. Of course. Mr. Khan says, isn't it true, Mr. Menendez, that these are things that you told Dr. Oziel, not things that he told you? I think Lyle mentions in there after that paragraph that it was Dr. Oziel who mentioned it first. Mr. Menendez says, Mr. Menendez, what I am asking or saying to you is, isn't it true that all of the things that you are now telling this jury are things which you told Dr. Oziel, not what he told you? Objection, vague, compound, and unspecific. Overruled. The witness says on the tape, if you would like me to show you, Mr. Khan says, I would object as non-responsive. It can be answered yes or no. The court says he hasn't answered the question yet, so I can't say if it is or isn't. The witness says Lyle talks about the fact that it was Dr. Oziel whose idea this was. The court says objection overruled. The answer will stand. Mr. Khan says he says it was Dr. Oziel's idea to do what? The answer, the witness answers, I will show you if you want me to. Do you know where that is? Right here, he indicates to. Do you want me to read it? Just point it out, says Mr. Khan. Eric says, where he says, she just said, okay, kill us at some point. And that's feeling, he's talking about my relatives. I mean, obviously, that isn't my feeling. I could see how they could believe that through reading those letters, and I kept thinking it over almost as if it was true. He's talking about a mercy killing, almost as if it was true, almost as if it was like an instrument of hers in killing herself. And that's where we sort of feel you mentioned before we were doing her a favor. We were doing her and us a favor, putting her out of her misery. That's what a licensed doctor told them, which is just insane to me. So when he says you mentioned this before, you're telling this jury that he was referring to what? That's what That was Dr. Oziel's theory of why this happened, that we were putting her out of her misery and that she wanted to be put out of her misery is what he believed happened. Lyle mentioned that you mentioned this before in reference to what point in time? Either earlier that day or November 2nd that we were saying it was almost as if it was true, almost as if it was like a mercy killing. Later in the tape, he then corrects himself and states it more clearly. Wasn't it true, Mr. Menendez, that what Lyle was referring to was the paragraph that I just read you, in which Dr. Oziel is not telling you it was a mercy killing. He is asking you if it was a mercy killing. Objection. It's argumentative, says Levin. Erik says no. Mr. Levin says, and it misstates what's on the tape. The court says overruled. The witness says no. Mr. Khan says, so you are saying that there was never a conversation which has not been recorded in which Dr. Oziel suggests that it was a mercy killing. Is that correct? First of all, there are two other recordings which unfortunately we don't have, which would explain what was going on that day much more clearly. But certainly, it was Dr. Oziel who, on November 2nd, was talking about the fact that my mother wanted to take her own life. And it was his colleague who was my mom's therapist who knew that she had tried to take her life many times. Why are they talking about that together with, why is he talking about that with a colleague? Mr. Khan says, I would object as non-responsive. I would ask that the witness be admonished at this point to answer the question, says Mr. Khan. The court says, objection sustained, and the answer is stricken. Mr. Khan says, ask your next question. Mr. Khan says, Mr. Menendez, try to focus on the question. Mr. Levin says, objection, Your Honor, to counsel admonishing the witness of anything. The court says, let's just ask the questions without discussions. Dog, you're really getting on my nerves here. I think he's hungry for dinner. So at this point, I'm going to have to stop and pick up tomorrow for me, but it'll be in the same video for you. So I'll be right back. I'm back, and let's continue with Mr. Khan's next question. He says, Mr. Menendez, try to focus on the question. Objection, Your Honor, to counsel admonishing the witness of anything. The court says, let's just ask the questions without discussion. So he doesn't even say like, okay, no commentary or strike that or anything. He just is like, move on. Mr. Khan says, isn't it true, Mr. Menendez, that in that point in the transcript where Lyle Menendez said, you mentioned this before, he is referring to the paragraph which I just read to you, in which Dr. Oziel was asking you a question as to whether or not it was a mercy killing? May I read the paragraph that you just read? Yes. What Lyle says is not what's in this paragraph. What Lyle says Dr. Oziel mentioned before was that we were doing her and us a favor in putting her out of her misery, and that she could kill herself at any moment, and that our reaction was we knew if she killed herself, my father was in trouble. And that's not what Dr. Oziel says in that one sentence of us sparing her. It was what is mostly talked about throughout the session with him. So you're telling us there was an agreement between yourself and Dr. Oziel that you were going to say certain things on this tape? Is that correct? Primarily the mercy killing, and that my father was killed because he couldn't live without him, or he couldn't live with himself for basically having killed my mother, and that he was killed to eliminate the problem of my mom in terms of what he was doing to my mom. That's what we had agreed to talk about before. Did you tell Dr. Oziel? Dr. Oziel, why should I say that on tape? Because Dr. Oziel wanted us to say that on tape because that's what he believed really happened. So you're saying that Dr. Oziel, in your view, was blackmailing you, is that correct? That's not in my view. He was. He said so on a tape that he was blackmailing us and wanted $14 million. You have the tape. Oh, okay. I didn't know about this, and I don't believe this came out in the second trial or in the first trial at all about a second tape where he was on tape saying he wanted $14 million from the brothers. No wonder they couldn't call Oziel because maybe the defense finally uh, was able to, you know, tell them this is what we know. And this is what we know you're hiding from us. Anyways, next question. We have the tape. Where is that tape, Mr. Menendez? Detective Zoller tape recorded it where he was saying there's $14 million at stake. I mean, he has a documented history of blackmailing other patients. Okay. And he just rolls right over that. Have you heard that tape? He doesn't need to hear, like, he didn't want that to come out, I'm sure, about the blackmailing other patients. So he's just like, let's just forget that you said that. Have you heard that tape? There's no question he was blackmailing us. Have you heard that tape, Mr. Menendez, since your arrest? I heard it last trial in court when Dr. Oziel was testifying. Oh, so they did play it. I don't remember them making as big a deal about it as this, if it was brought out. So you're saying that in that tape he says that statement, is that correct? He admitted to it on the stand. Mr. Menendez, when Dr. Oziel said to you, I want you to say certain things on that tape, did you tell him I'm not going to do that? No, he didn't put it like that. He said, this is what I want. What I want to talk about on the tape are the reasons you killed your parents. And we talked about the reasons, and we talked about the fact that it was a mercy killing and why dad was killed. And he said, now I want you to bring up experiences to try to show that that's what happened. And that's when we began making the tapes. I honestly don't remember that coming out in the first trial, but he was such a scumbag on trial for the few days that he was on the stand that it was like ridiculous. There were so many things that drove me insane. So I probably forgot some of the things that he did. Did you say to your brother, if we say what Dr. Oziel is asking us to say, it's going to sound like it's a premeditated murder? Clearly, what Dr. Oziel was saying happened was a premeditated murder. How could it be any other way if it's a mercy killing? Right. It has to be. So you agree that the way it sounds on this tape recording is like a premeditated murder, don't you? Yes. Okay, and so you and your brother said, okay, Dr. Oziel, even though I know you're blackmailing us, we're going to sit down and we're going to help you put together a tape recording that makes it sound like this was a premeditated murder. There wasn't any other option. If we didn't make the tape, he went to the police. Well, what would you have to lose, Mr. Menendez? What would you have to lose if he was going to go to the police? Wouldn't you rather have him go to the police without a recording than to go to the police with a recording in which you say, in essence, that it was a premeditated murder? Well, he was saying that he was not going to go to the police with the recording, and he never did go to the police with the recording. It was Judalon who did. You got the recording through other means, but he didn't want to give it to you. He wanted to continue with these sessions until the inheritance came through and the estate. He didn't want to go to the police, and he didn't. That's a very important distinction. He could have gone to the police at any time. He made these tapes, so he had leverage over the brothers because he wanted to continue blackmailing them until he got his portion of whatever he wanted. So you agree that it was your intent at that point to assist Dr. Oziel in putting together a tape recording that would make it look like this was premeditated. Is that correct? No. That's not what I cared about. I just cared about appeasing him and satisfying him. And if he wanted a tape where he admitted that we did it, then that was fine. Anything that he wanted at that point, we were going to give him. I mean, we had no other options. Well, what you're telling this jury is he wanted more than an admission that you did it. He wanted a tape recording in which it would make it sound like it was a premeditated murder. Is that correct? No, He wanted a tape recording of the reasons that he believed this happened, which was what I just told you. He didn't just want a tape recording where we said, yes, I am responsible. He wanted a tape recording that looked like we were talking about why this happened, and so he made several tapes. So, in response to the question that he asked you, the paragraph that you just read, you responded, "Well, we were doing almost in my mom's case something that first of all, there was no way never could live that n- there was no way never could she live without my father." Do you remember that response? Yes. And you were making it sound like this was a mercy killing. Is that correct? That was the idea. I'm sorry. That was the idea. You're telling us that that was false? My mother did not want to take her own life in 88 or in 89. Her ideations to take her own life and her extreme depression ended in 87. Certainly anyone that really knew her knows that. Are you saying that Dr. Oziel told you these specific words to say, or are you telling us that these were your only choice of words at that point in time? Well, they were my only choice of words. Do you remember that it was right after that Lyle Menendez, in directing counsel's attention to the bottom of page 4, said that that was something that we had to really, it was a big thing holding us back from killing my father, was that we thought that we would just kill dad and eliminate the problem. Do you remember him saying that? Right. Did you understand him to be saying that it was the killing of your mother that held you back from killing your father? I'm not sure what exactly the interpretation was, but that's primarily what it was. But you understood that that's essentially what he was saying at that point in time, correct? Yes. Are you telling us that that is not true? My mother did not want to take her own life in 1989. The question can be answered yes or no. Are you telling us that's not true? Objection, Your Honor. Counsel cannot suggest how the witness answer the question. The court says the question can be answered yes or no. The witness says that's not true. He's still got in more than a no. I laugh at that because it's like, well, you can say it in multiple ways. Mr. Khan says, and at that point, did you interpret your brother and say, that's not true? Or interrupt, I'm sorry. Did you interrupt your brother and say, that's not true, Lyle? Let's not put together on a tape that makes us look like a premeditated murder. I suggested that to Lyle before the session began, that if we're going to talk on the tape, that perhaps we should tell what really happened and it could solve all the problems. And Dr. Oziel wouldn't want to go to the police at that point. But Lyle was very adamant as he was later in jail, that he did not want to discuss these things. We were not going to talk about it, and I wasn't going to bully him into doing it. He was my brother and had sacrificed for me in the past. Now, Mr. Menendez, Jerry Chaliff had just left the session a short time before this recording began. Is that correct? About an hour before the recording began. And Jerry Chaliff is a prominent criminal defense attorney in Los Angeles. Is that correct? Objection, calls for a conclusion. Overruled. Yes, yes. So did you say to your brother, hey, why are we putting together a tape recording that maybe it looks like a premeditated murder? Maybe we ought to talk to Gary Chaliff about this? No. Why not? Objection, Your Honor. It would call for privileged information, perhaps. The court says why he didn't do such a thing. Overruled. The witness says, what exactly are you asking? I am asking you, why would you put together a tape recording that makes it look like a premeditated murder when you just had a prominent criminal defense lawyer leave the room just a short time earlier? The only thing I cared about was that this tape, if made, was completely and utterly privileged and could never be used, would always remain confidential. And the reason I was concerned about that is because I knew that what we were going to be talking about was Dr. Oziel's theories and why this happened and not what really happened. And so the only thing I cared about is that this was confidential. And That's what Lyle cared about, and that's why people have come into the courtroom and testified that Lyle afterwards said, if the police get their hands on those tapes, I'm screwed. We didn't believe that these tapes could in any way conceivably be helpful. I just got lucky that the tape Dr. Oziel wanted to keep for whatever reason is the tape where I actually began to break down and tell the truth. Mr. Menendez, you believed that this was a blackmail tape, is that correct? Yes. Did you discuss that with your attorney? No. Did you tell Jerry Chaliff before you went into that room? Objection, Your Honor. There are reasons for that, says the witness. Mr. Levin says anything he may have said to this attorney as being privileged. The court says this is something, the question is whether he did say it or did not say it. Is that the question? That's correct. I did not. Overruled. Mr. Khan says, so you did not discuss with your attorney, Jerry Chaliff, that you were going to go into a session in which you would be assisting Dr. Oziel in making a blackmail tape against you? Same objection, says Mr. Levin. The witness says the way you're characterizing it and making it sound is misstating what happened. And unfortunately, I can't go any further than that. It's not the way it happened. Why can't you go any further than that? Objection. The court says, ask your next question, please. He's trying to get into attorney client privileged conversations. That's in bad faith. Why are you doing that? We already had this argument about it, but yet he's still trying to do it. Anyways, the court says, ask your next question. Yes. So the answer is objection sustained. Wow. Mr. Khan says, why can't you go any further than that? Objection. Ask your next question, please, says the court. Mr. Khan says, so the answer is objection sustained. He's really pushing it. But of course, he won't get yelled at or anything like that. Mr. Khan says, so the answer is no, you did not discuss with your criminal defense attorney the fact that you were going into a session in which you were going to cooperate in the making of the tape recording that was going to make it look like premeditation. Objection. The answer is what Mr. Menendez gave, not what Mr. Khan wants him to give. Overruled. Erik says he wasn't my criminal defense attorney. He was the family attorney, and the answer is no. At any point in this, either with Dr. Oziel, did you ever turn to your brother Lyle and say, hey, maybe we need a better lawyer to advise us as to whether or not we would be participating in the making of a tape recording that makes it look like a premeditated killing? Did I say that during the session? Yes. In front of Dr. Oziel? In front? No, says the witness. In front of Dr. Oziel or outside the presence of Dr. Oziel? Once we left the session was over. So you never said that to your brother at any time during that interview, is that correct? Right. Now, do you remember Lyle Menendez indicating during the course of that conversation that your mother was very cold? She was always very good at stressful situations, very calm. Vaguely. And do you remember, and is that true? She was generally angry at life. She was very good in stressful situations. She was someone who would pride herself on her bravery and her strength in getting what she wanted. What do you mean by she was good at stressful situations? She confronted people, would go up to their face and start yelling in their face, did not back down, prided herself on not being afraid of anyone except for Dad, and she was very good at confrontational, stressful situations. She was calm during stressful situations, is that correct? I don't know how to answer that. Well, is it true that your mother was or was not calm during stressful situations? Sometimes she was calm. It depended on, I suppose, if she was initiating the confrontation. Now, did you feel that you were an instrument of your mother in killing herself? Objection. It's vague. Overruled. I never felt that we were instruments in her killing herself. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe that my mother no longer wanted to live. It was extremely comforting to me to think that my mother wouldn't want to live anyway, and that she would want to die, but I knew that she had not asked me to kill her. Mr. Menendez, why would it be comforting for you to hear that your mother wanted to die when you're telling us today that you know today that your mother did not want to die? It would be comforting. It was comforting because I could not live with myself. I hated myself for what I did, and the idea, the thought that my mother might not have wanted to live was a very I can't even describe the words. It was not soothing if she wanted to live. Sorry, if she wanted to live, it was not soothing. It took the weight or the burden or extreme hate for myself and diminished it because the thought that, well, maybe mom didn't want to live anyway. I mean, Dr. Oziel, he was a doctor, and at that time I respected him for his intelligence. He shouldn't have, he's pretty dumb. And maybe what he was saying was right, anyways. Is there any, like, ethical psychologist or psychiatrist that would actually do the things that Oziel is doing? Absolutely not. So anything that Oziel says or anything that came out of those sessions, you cannot, you have to take it with a grain of salt. And that includes the things that were spoken about on those tapes. So you began to think that you were wrong and that your mother really did want to die. Is that what you're telling us? From what he was telling me and the knowledge he had from talking to her and talking to her therapist, yes, I was beginning to wonder because it's what I wanted to hear. Now, do you remember Lyle Menendez saying during that interview, directing counsel's attention to page 12, beginning at line 23? And so, for my mother's sake, I thought we had to come. Like I was saying before, we had to make a decision. It was one of the harder ones, and it was a separate issue. Something unintelligible there. What is that? A note from the court clerk to herself that he said something unintelligible. That's the reason why my father should be killed. There's no question. What he's doing is he is impossible to live with for himself and for it. It continues on myself based on what he's doing to my mother. Do you remember your brother saying that? No. If you could show it to me, though. Okay. Yes. And you heard your brother say in that passage that it was one of the harder decisions that he had to make. Is that correct? I think those were the words used, yes. And what did you understand your brother Lyle Menendez to mean when he said during that session on December the 11th that it was one of the harder decisions to make? I can't tell you what he meant for every word. I never, when I was listening to it. I didn't think the words were important. It was just the sentiment that he was trying to convey. Whatever words he used, that what my dad would be was what that my that what my dad would be was that with my mom's death, it would be that my dad killed her from tormenting her throughout her life. That was very oddly worded. Apologies for stumbling through that. And then I'm not sure what the theory is on all that, but those are the words. The question that I asked you is what did you understand your brother to be talking about when he spoke, when he used the word decision, the mercy killing? And you didn't stop him at that point and say, this is not true. I am not going to be a part of it. Not yet. Objection with respect to the question of vague, or with respect to the question as vague, part of what? The court says objection sustained, the answer is stricken. Mr. Khan says, did you say at that point in time, this is not true? I don't want to participate in the tape recording of a statement that makes it sound like a premeditated murder. I didn't care what it sounded like, or I didn't care that it sounded like premeditated murder. I just didn't want Dr. Oziel to go to the police. The fact that it sounded like a premeditated murder, obviously a mercy killing, that's what I would have, it would have to be. But Mr. Menendez, did it occur to you that if Dr. Oziel were the type of person who would blackmail you, that if you were to participate in the blackmail, in the making of the tape, that made it sound like a premeditated murder, he would have even more information that we could use to blackmail you? What? I think that question should have been objected to. He says it was a judgment call. I mean, if I had known that he had a history, a documented history of blackmailing people, I would have said no, absolutely not. He said, I'll go to the police, but if you make this tape, then I will feel more comfortable. There's all kinds of benefits we can have from making this tape, and when you inherit, we will invest together, and it will be a mutually beneficial relationship. And we said, fine, great. If that means you won't go to the police, we'll do it. And he didn't go to the police, and it all worked, and it worked. Mr. Menendez, when you say it was a judgment call, was this a judgment that you reached all on your own or in conjunction with Lyle Menendez? What Lyle and I did, we did together. Did anyone else assist you in reaching the conclusion that you and Lyle Menendez should sit down and participate in the making of the tape that could potentially be used to blackmail you? Dr. Oziel, did anyone assist you in the thought of sitting down and making this tape? Yes, Dr. Oziel. That it was his idea. Just the three of you? Only the three of us. Did you ever decide to talk to a lawyer about that? Objection, Your Honor. It may call for privileged information. The court says, well, he is asking him, did he decide to, or did he actually, or why don't you rephrase the question? Mr. Khan says, yes. Did you ever talk to a lawyer about whether or not you should participate in the making of a tape with Dr. Oziel, which would make it sound like a premeditated murder? I couldn't. The only thing I was concerned about is if a tape was. The court says, what is your answer? Did you or didn't you? I did not. Mr. Khan says, did you think it might be a wise idea to do so? You began this tape to do so before you began this tape in the recording on December 11th. Objection, irrelevant. The witness says, I did not believe it would be a wise idea. Mr. Levin says, also calls for speculation. Overruled, the answer will stand, says the court. Did you not think it would be a wise idea to discuss it with an attorney first? No. Objection vague. Discuss what? Overruled. And in that paragraph that I just read to you about Lyle Menendez talking about making a decision, do you remember Lyle Menendez also saying that my father should be killed? There is no question. Yes. Was that your feeling that your father, prior to the shooting, that was your feeling prior to the shooting, that your father should be killed? No question. With what really happened or within the mercy killing theory? I'm just asking you, based upon what you said is the truth, did you feel that your father should be killed? No. So did you stop Lyle Menendez at that point in time and say you shouldn't be making statements like that on a tape that could be used to blackmail us? Only at one point in the tape did I stop everyone and say, what you're saying is a fantasy. It's not true. I don't want to hear it. this happened because we had no choice. And if there was any other choice, I would have taken it. I only did that one time. You say there is a fantasy in this recording? Yes. Those words. Yes. What you were referring to at that point in time was the fact that you didn't like to hear or talk about negative things about your father. Is that correct? Certainly, I did not want to hear negative things about my father, but when I said that it was a fantasy, I was referring to the fact that these things are just not true. But they're not true. Hearing negative things put like that hurts me, and I don't want to hear it. Talking about the mercy killing was more of a comfort. Talking badly about my father, and I can read you where he talks about it, hurt me. When you said this is a fantasy, you meant by that these things are not true. What things are not true? The reason why my parents were killed. You mean the mercy killing theory? Yes, and that's my father. And yes, and that my father had to be killed to eliminate the problem and those things. So then, did you say that on tape? Did you say the mercy killing that is being discussed on this tape is not true? I said it in words that I could best do as I was crying, which was that this happened because I had no choice, which is directly opposite of what the theory was. But I couldn't help it. I was put in a position where I had been taping now for 3 hours. I had been listening to this stuff. I didn't want to hear it anymore, and I wanted to go home. I wanted this to be over, and I just couldn't stand listening to it anymore. And it wasn't that happened, and I was trying to express that as best as I could. I don't know. That's missing a word there somewhere. What was your reason for saying this is a fantasy? I was sobbing and saying that I don't want to hear what you're saying. Whether it's true or not, what you're saying doesn't make any difference. In other words, whether it's a fantasy, I don't care about. I just don't want to hear it because it's not what happened. What happened is we had no choice, and if I had any other choice, I would have taken it. My question, Mr. Menendez, is what was your reason for saying that this is a fantasy? To express to him that what he's saying, whether it was true or not, doesn't matter. I am still hurt by hearing it. Was it your intention at that time to clear up for the record that this mercy killing theory was not true? What record? It was taped. Didn't you know that a record or the tape recording was being made? And the tape recordings were legally never to be able to get into someone's hand, where I could therefore be arrested because of this tape recording, where people could actually think that that is why my mother and father were killed, when clearly it wasn't. Well, if this tape recording was never going to be in anyone's hands, Mr. Menendez, then why didn't you simply say it at that time? None of this is true. We killed our parents in self defense, not because it was a mercy killing. It's essentially what I said, and I'm not supposed to be saying it. I was essentially what I was saying. That is essentially what I was saying. Because of myself saying it, Lyle then goes right back and says, "No, it's a mercy killing," and wraps it up. Because I am now breaking down and about to tell what happened, because it was like at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and we had been there for many hours, and clearly we had to make that tape. If we didn't make the tape, he made it very clear he could go to the police. It was one or the other. Now, did you tell a lawyer that you were being threatened that way? No, sir, I did not. When you used the words, "this is a fantasy," why did you not elaborate at that point in time and clarify what you meant by "this is a fantasy"? I thought I was clarifying it. I thought it was quite clear. You never said anywhere on this tape record on this tape. They keep calling it a tape recording every time, and then it catches me every time. Sorry. Just gonna call it a tape, not a recording. You never said anywhere on this tape that this mercy killing theory is true, did you? I said we had no choice but to do what we did. Obviously, if it was a mercy killing, I had a choice in the matter. The question I asked you is, did you ever say on the tape recording that this was not a tape, a mercy killing? No, I would not have done it that way. And you never stated on this tape recording that the reason that it is being given for your father, that is being given for your father being killed, is not true. The reason for your father being killed is not true. Sorry. Weirdly worded. We say things in ways that aren't grammatically correct a lot of times, and it's very off-putting when you're reading it. I believe that's what I have just been saying, says the witness. Right, that you did not say that on the tape. Is that correct? That I did in the way I have been just saying. That I did in the way that I have just been saying. Okay, I don't know. People just talk differently than they do when it's like actual English writing, which is what I'm much better at. You made a vague remark about a fantasy now that you're saying that by fantasy you meant that the mercy killing is not true. Is that correct? Mr. Lemon says objection, argumentative in respect to vague. Sustained, rephrase the question. You never clarified what you meant by fantasy, did you? Sir, if you'd like me to read what I said, I think it'd be very obvious what I am saying about the mercy killing is not true. So there is a pause, and then he says, I say I don't feel like hearing these things about my father. My brother says, true. Dr. Oziel says, what are you feeling? I was upset. He says, hurt, sad. Do you want to tell me what you're feeling? And I said, I pushed him out of my mind, and my mother and father were two people I loved. I just don't want to hear anything about them. It doesn't matter what they were or whether it was a fantasy or wasn't. They were very apparent in my mind before this led up to the fact that I had no other choice. I would have taken any other choice, and because I look back on it and realizing what people are worth and say I very much regret it. And I may not have had a choice at the time, but I regret it now, and I am like the image had when I was 14 years old. I had a mother and a father that loved each other and loved me, and it was the kind of relationship that I try to bring it back in my mind, and it's kind of like it was like, and I like that plain and simple. What? And I don't like my hearing. I'm sorry, and I don't like hearing my father put in this sort of way. So don't talk bad about my dad. And so to go say, and I loved him and almost had no choice but to do what I did, and I hate myself for doing it, and then I go on and on. Mr. Khan asks, is that where you're saying you make it clear that this is not a mercy killing? I'm saying what I just read is a mercy killing. Are you saying that you made it clear in this paragraph that this was not a mercy killing? I thought I had. And in what way did you make it clear that this is not a mercy killing? By telling him that if I saw any other way or any other choice but to do what I did, I would have taken that choice. But at the moment, I didn't see any other choice. Looking back, I realize now that I had a clear choice, and I wish would have run away. And I had no choice but to do what I did and hate myself for doing it. Clearly, that's not us weighing and deciding whether or not we should whether or not mom wants to die and whether or not she's asking to be killed and deciding whether we should or shouldn't. It's, I thought it was strictly the opposite. When you were saying in these paragraphs is that you had almost no choice because the mercy killing had to happen, isn't that true? No, absolutely not. Well, did you remember the transcript saying to Dr. Oziel, directing counsel's attention to page 23, line 9? Let me get back to when the affair, whatever came out. Probably face the fact that my mother had to be killed. It was the only way out, and it was the only way out for her. So do you remember saying that? I believe I said it was the only way out for her. Well, let me show you what that transcript says. Mr. Levin says, objection with respect to what the transcript says. It's what is on the tape and what the recall says. Court says, well, he can still be shown the transcript to see if it refreshes his recollection. Mr. Khan says, okay, directing your attention to lines 9 and 10. And I say that I was taught to love Dad, and because I wanted to love him, and the affair came out, and to face the fact that my mother had to be killed, that is what the only way out was. It was the only way out for us, and that's why I can't even face it. And that was the problem. It was the fact that my mother, we thought, had to be killed in those circumstances that was causing me to go to Oziel because I couldn't live with myself and hated myself for doing it. First, what I'm saying is, why am I there in the first place? Isn't what you were talking about here is that after the affair came out that your mother had to be killed? Is that the only way out? It was the only way out for her? The affair came out in 1986. She was killed in 1989, 3 years later. The two have nothing to do with each other. But you were trying to tell Dr. Oziel at that time that it was a mercy kill based on that theory, weren't you? That's not what I was trying to tell Dr. Oziel. It's what we had agreed to say on the tape. Were you linking in this passage the fact that your mother had to be killed and that was the only way out with the fact that the affair came out? I don't I don't see the connection. Where I said the two were connected, I that's two sequences of an entire paragraph. Okay, and aren't these your words? And when the affair, whatever came out, probably the fact that my mother had to be killed, and it was the only way out. It was the only way out for her. Aren't those your words? I don't believe it's clear. And I understand how it sounds when you read it like that, but that's not what I was intending to convey at the time. And I was crying and saying these words, and I said a lot of that paragraph. I said a lot of that paragraph. That's not what I intended to convey. And well, can you tell us why then? And even if it had been, it's what the theory was, and that's what we were there for, to say whatever Dr. Oziel wanted. So whatever his answer, like it didn't matter really, because you had to answer the way Oziel wanted. Can you tell us why, right after saying when the affair, whatever came out, you mentioned then, why is he saying it like whatever? It was definitely an affair. Why does he keep referring it to it like it was something, I don't know, maybe a second family or something like I don't know, his affair or whatever. Can you tell us why, right after saying when the affair or whatever came out, you mentioned you mentioned then that your mother had to be killed and it was the only way out. No, I can't. If you can maybe I can read the entire paragraph and I can understand it better. There's a brief pause. The witness says, I don't know what is in my mind and why I put the affair before those words. Mr. Khan says, can't answer that question. Is that correct, Mr. Menendez? It's very difficult for me to go back and remember what I was doing, what I was thinking when I was crying at that time. Well, isn't it true, Mr. Menendez, that you were characterizing the killing of your mother as a mercy killing because you didn't want to admit to Dr. Oziel that you and your brother Lyle Menendez had been premeditating the killing of both your mother and your father before it took place? I make it absolutely clear on the tape when I break down that this was not a mercy killing. Early on, it's what, although I never said it, I would have conveyed it if he had asked me directly. Those weren't his words. If Dr. Oziel asked me specifically, I would have said something else. This was not premeditated, Erik goes on. My brother and I did not premeditate this. If it had been, we would be talking about that. We would be talking about that on the tape, and we were talking about what really happened on the tape, which was certainly not a mercy killing. This happened because we believed that we had no other choice. And looking back at it, I realized that I should have done other things, and I wish I could have, but that is not why it happened. Are you telling us that it was your intention to make it clear to Dr. Oziel that this was not a mercy killing? What I am saying is, when he said what he was saying in the exact paragraph above what I said, that I couldn't take hearing it, he was putting my father in a way that made it sound like because my father did all those bad things that he deserved to die. I would object, non-responsive, says Mr. Khan. Let's have the question read back. Are you telling us that it was your intention to make it clear to Dr. Oziel that this was not a mercy killing? The court says objection sustained and the answer is stricken. I guess because it was about Jose. Mr. Khan says, once again, Mr. Menendez, are you telling us that it was your intention to make it clear to Dr. Oziel that this was not a mercy killing? Well, while I was crying and I was saying those words, I wanted to convey that it wasn't. I wasn't supposed to. That's not what I went into the taping to convey, and I certainly didn't want to, and I didn't. So my brother, after I had almost done it, stopped me from going on and tried to sum up quickly for Dr. Oziel the mercy killing theory. And I wasn't supposed to do that, and I didn't want to do that. If it was your intention to make it clear, to Dr. Oziel, that this was not a mercy killing, why didn't you come right out and say that? Objection, misstates his testimony. Overruled. It wasn't my intention. Right. And you never tried to make it sound like it was a mercy killing, isn't that true? I just read to you what I said, and I think the meaning is clear from what I'm saying. And isn't it true, Mr. Menendez, that the reason why you can't tell us why, right after speaking about the affair, you said your mother had to be killed, it's because there you are again saying that it was a mercy killing? Objection. Argumentative. Overruled. Erik says, do you really believe that the reason I said I have no choice? Objection. Non-responsive. The court says, let's not ask questions, just answer them. But it seems like he might even be a little offended by that question there. Do you really think that? Like, what? Like, that obviously never even occurred to me. The witness says, no, sir, that's not why. The court says, all right, let's take our recess. And we will resume in 20 minutes. Don't discuss the matter. Don't form any final opinions. We will resume in 20 minutes. So they take their break, then they come back. Court says, all right, we have everyone present. Let's get the jury out, please. Ms. Abramson says, are we going to have another recess before 2:30? The court says, yes, sure. Court says, the jury is back in the box. You may continue your cross-examination. Mr. Khan says, thank you. Later in that conversation on December 11th, do you recall telling Dr. Oziel that you almost had no choice to do what you did? Yes. And you used the words almost no choice to do what you did because you recognized even in this session that you did, in fact, have a choice to do what you did. Is that correct? Objection, argumentative as phrased. The court says overruled. The witness says, I knew before the session that I should have run away or killed myself or did anything but bring my brother and get my brother involved in it and what led to my parents' death. And I should have taken another way out, and I wished that I had. And that's why I refer to it that way. Because you recognized that there was an alternative to do what you did. Is that correct? And I wish that I had taken it. And you had no choice to take that alternative. Is that correct? At the time, I didn't see I had a choice, but I looked and realized I almost had no choice. So looking back, you can see maybe there were choices, but in the heat of the moment, you don't think so. Well, if you recognize that you had no choice, then why didn't you say you had no choice instead of saying I almost had no choice? Objection, argumentative, overruled. Because it was my emotion that was guiding me instead of thinking and trying to restrain the rising tide of fear. And I realized afterwards that I wish I would have been able to say, let's go. I can get away. But emotionally, I didn't feel that I could. I knew that I couldn't at the time. But Mr. Menendez, you weren't talking about a situation in which you were killed in fear when you were talking to Dr. Oziel. You were talking about a mercy killing, weren't you? What we're talking about now are things that I didn't intend to split out. I didn't intend to say that. It just came out as I was crying because I couldn't take listening to it anymore. It was awful listening to. And you recognized, in reference to the killing of your parents, that you did, in fact, have a choice in the time of the killings. Is that correct? Objection, vague. Vague about what? Vague as to time, says Mr. Levin. The question is reference to a time of when. The court says on the conversation or the time of his realization. Mr. Levin says that's the basis of the objection. The court says, why don't you rephrase it that way? Mr. Khan says, while you were speaking to Dr. Oziel on December 11th and you made the statement to him that you almost had no choice, what were you recognizing in that point in time? Was that at the time of the killing that you did, in fact, have a choice? What I was recognizing is I felt I had no choice, but I did and should have taken it. Now, do you recall also saying to Dr. Oziel that the killing was more difficult because of my mother? If you would show me, I could. Mr. Khan says, directing counsel's attention to page 21, line 22. Witness says, what I'm saying is it's harder to live. It's harder to live with what I did because of my mother and what an amazing tragedy her life was. Right. The reason why it's more difficult to live with is because there was absolutely no reason to kill your mother in the den that night. Is that correct, Mr. Menendez? No. What I'm talking about there is it's impossible to live with that under any circumstances. I don't care if she would have had a weapon that I physically saw at the time. The answer, oh, I just lost my place. It's a fact. I don't even know where I got answer from. The fact that a son, can kill a mother is something that is it's always impossible to live with. Why is a child killing his father? Let me ask you this. Are you saying you were a child at the time of the killing, Mr. Menendez? I corrected it to say son. Why is it more, why is it easier to live with when a son kills his father? Well, considering the fact that my father had been having sex with me for 12 years, it wasn't as difficult to have with as the fact that My mother, who I adored and loved, was no longer in my life, and I missed her tremendously, and I didn't realize how much I needed her in my life. Do you remember being asked this question by Dr. Oziel? What was beyond control? That you had to kill him? And you said in response to that question, eventually it had to happen. It was basically ruining my life and I guess Lyle's and he was parting my I'm sorry, he was putting my mother through torture. And I got to a point where he was amazing. He would do great things for me and he would just I wouldn't understand why. I know that she loved me somehow. We couldn't just. Do you recall giving that answer? I don't recall in terms of where it was, but somewhere saying, but I remember saying, because I remember being in a session and saying that it was ruining my life, that it eventually had to happen. And when I say that, I guess it was ruining Lyle's. I only had that because Lyle told me that he had been molested too. Mr. Khan says, I would object, non-responsive. Court says, objection. He asked and uh, he asked why he said that. Mr. Khan says the question as did he recall saying that. So we just skip over that. Okay. The court says, well, let's resolve that debate very easily by having the reporter read it back. So she does. So where was the question here? Here's the question. Well, it's a quote from the previous trial, right? I don't know. Question. Eventually, it had to happen. It was basically ruining my life, I guess, Lyle's, and he was putting my mother through torture, and it got to a point where he was amazing. He would do great things for me, and would just I wouldn't understand why. I know that she loved me somehow. We could just, and then it cuts him off. Do you recall giving that answer? He says he doesn't recall. Okay, so the question was, do you recall giving that answer? And he goes on and on and on. He tends to talk a lot. He says, I don't recall in terms of where it was, but I remember saying, because I remember being in a session and saying that it was ruining my life, that it eventually had to happen. And when I say that I guess it was ruining Lyle's, I only said that because Lyle told me he had been molested too. But you didn't answer the question as to did you recall hearing or seeing this? So, I don't know. Anyways, so Mr. Khan objected as non-responsive to that answer, and they had it read back. The court says the objection sustained by the prosecution, the last answers stricken. Mr. Khan says, my question to you, Mr. Menendez, do you remember giving that answer? I gave that answer. Okay, and can you tell us after Dr. Oziel asked you what was beyond control that you had killed him, why did you answer eventually it had to happen? May I see it, please? Right. I said, because of my father, I said, and I hate him for that, and I love him, and it's something that's way beyond control. And Dr. Oziel said, what was beyond control? And what was beyond control that you had to kill him? And I just continue. My question is, or his question is, in between my sentence where I'm saying it was something that was way beyond control and eventually it had to happen. It was basically ruining my life and I guess Lyle's. And that's where I talk about the molestation and I talk about, I guess, Lyle's because I knew I had that happen, or I knew that that had happened to Lyle in the past. My question to you is when you gave the answer, eventually it had to happen, what were you referring to? I was continuing on in my sentence. If you read what my sentence is. Well, then continue on with your sentence and explain to the jury what you were referring to when you said these words. Eventually, it had to happen. That at some point, the sex was going to end and eventually it had to happen, and that it was way beyond control. It was beyond what I could control. He couldn't take it anymore. He was at a breaking point, is what I'm taking from what he's saying. The court says he's asking you what had happened. No, he's asking you what had to happen. The witness says, "Oh, that my father. I think I referred there that my father had to die, but I'm not sure. If I could see it, I'm sorry. I'm not I'm not certain. I think what I'm saying is it had to end. Eventually, it had to happen, and that the blow up inside the family was inevitable, that at some point it was going to happen because I realized that there was going to be a time when I needed to break away from it, and I wasn't going to be allowed to, and eventually the blow up had to happen." Well, in the preceding sentence, you were talking about sex ending, were you? Well, at the preceding sentence, I was talking about the fact that I love and hate my father. Well, isn't it true, Mr. Menendez, that you said eventually it had to happen after Dr. Oziel asked you that you had to kill him, because what you were saying is that eventually you were going to kill him? Is that just a matter of time? No, that's not at all what I'm saying. Well, isn't it true that you said that because you said that the lifestyle you were referring to, the lifestyle that you were living with your father, was ruining your life and, I guess, Lyle's? No. Will you show me in there where it says lifestyle? I'm asking you what you mean by it now. Isn't it true that you said eventually it had to happen? That is the killing, because it was basically ruining my life. And what you were referring to there was the relationship between yourself and your father. And, um, sorry, and he answers, other than sex, what was ruining my life with my father? Well, did you like the way that he made all the decisions in your life when you got to be 18 years old? He made decisions in my life always. He didn't make any decisions that we got into arguments about. You didn't find that to be controlling and domineering? He was a controlling man, but it's something that certainly not why I killed him. That he was that way all my life. So that he's always been controlling. What are you talking about? He's always told me what to do. Do I like it? I don't know. It's just what I've grown up. I'm used to. Why at this time, if it wasn't the sex, what was ruining my life? I'm asking you if you found him to be a controlling and dominating man over your life. Yes. And you also believe that he was a controlling and dominating man when it came to the life of your brother Lyle Menendez. Is that true? I knew that even when Lyle was at Princeton, he controlled virtually what Lyle did every day. And when you said in this transcript, it was basically ruining my life, and I guess Lyle's, what you were referring to was the control that the father was exercising over your life and the life of your brother. Isn't that true? No. And what you said eventually it had to happen, you were saying that because of the control that he was exercising over your life and your brother's life, that eventually you were going to kill him. And it was just a matter of time? That's not at all what it says there. Now, later in the conversation, did you say to Dr. Oziel, directing counsel's attention to pages 24, line 4, that I always thought that I could make all the money or whatever and it wouldn't make a difference, and leaving wouldn't be a problem. It would have to do with, and I couldn't live with him anymore. Do you recall saying that? No, not specifically. Okay, let me direct your attention to the line, leaving wouldn't be a problem on page 23. Do you recall saying that? I am talking about this point after my mother died that I would have had to leave, that I could not live with my father anymore. I'm not sure. I know uh, I remember saying just the opposite in the transcript. He remembers saying the opposite, but of course, they probably twist his words or something. Do you recall saying, because I always thought that I could make all this money or whatever, and it wouldn't make a difference. And I didn't leave, or I didn't, leaving wouldn't be a problem. I would have to do it. Yes. What I'm saying is don't have it in the context of what I mean. I would have to do it. So when you said that leaving wouldn't be a problem, you were referring to the leaving the home, is that correct? Leaving my father. Okay, and you told Dr. Oziel that leaving your father wouldn't be a problem, is that correct? I remember saying just the opposite at another point. I cannot put in context what I'm saying there. Mr. Menendez, I'm not asking you what you said at another point in the transcript. I'm asking you what you're referring to here. I don't know, sir. Allow me to finish the question. When you use the words, leaving wouldn't be a problem, you agree that you were referring to leaving the home, leaving your father. Is that correct? I believe that's what I'm referring to, leaving the situation, but had my mother died, I would have had no choice but to leave. And you said that you always thought that you could leave and make money. Is that correct? Yes, that's what I said. You weren't, so weren't you telling, sorry, tired and it was a long night. We've got a raccoon that keeps trying to get into our home. He did once. He got into our attic and now he keeps trying again, or she or whatever, and she destroyed one of my birdhouses and I'm not having it. And anyways, I woke up to scratching sounds on the roof. I thought it was Diogi, the new puppy, like up and about doing like making noise when I heard it. And then I was like, wait, he's right here next to me. And the other dog's right next to me. So I'm like, oh, okay. This was 2 in the morning. And so apologies. I'm really tired. And sometimes reading transcripts just doesn't help. So weren't you telling Dr. Oziel at this point that you always recognized that you could leave home and you would leave home under the right circumstances? The right circumstances, meaning that my mother had killed herself, that there was no way I could live with my father, and that I would have to leave. I don't know what exactly, but that is what I'm saying. What I'm asking you is, regardless of what the circumstances are, wouldn't you acknowledge to Dr. Oziel that you could leave the home under the right circumstances and you recognize that and always knew that? No, that's certainly not true. Then what were you referring to when you said leaving wouldn't be a problem? I don't know what I'm referring to, sir. You can't answer that question? I'm trying to answer your question and I'm trying to answer what I meant when I said every word during that particular hour, and it's not easy, but certainly leaving my father wasn't going to happen. But the fact that I would make up my mind and would have to leave, that would not be a problem. I would have no choice at that point. I mean, but I cannot tell you unless I read through it exactly what I'm saying and referring to there. Don't just like quote bomb me and not give me the context of what I said and try to like get me on something that is totally out of context. Prosecutors love to do this. Law enforcement sometimes likes to do that too. Well, why don't you read through that area and tell us, if you can, tell us why you told Dr. Oziel that leaving wouldn't be a problem. I don't put it into context with anything in that paragraph. It's sort of out there, floating around nowhere. At this point, I was rambling. I don't know why I said it. You can't tell us why you told Dr. Oziel that leaving the home wouldn't be a problem. Is that correct? What I'm saying is, independently, I can't remember saying it in this session, and from reading in the transcript, I don't put that sentence in context with anything. Do you recall telling Dr. Oziel later in the conversation, I really can't say whether I would have wanted another kind of father? Right, I do recall saying that. Was that your true and honest feeling at the time? I loved my father tremendously at the time, and the guilt was overwhelming, and I wanted him back. Well, what you told Dr. Oziel was not that you wanted him back, but you really can't say whether you would have wanted another kind of father. Isn't that true? I said all of that. I'm sorry. Yes, I did say that as well. And you said that you really couldn't say why you would have wanted another kind of father because your father never molested you. Is that correct? Sir, he molested me. Other people know he molested me. I'm not asking you what other people know, Mr. Menendez. I'm asking you, isn't it true that the reason why you said you really can't say whether I could have, whether I would have wanted another kind of father is because your father never molested you? Such a dumb question. He absolutely did. For 12 years of my life, other people know. Donovan Goodrow knows. Diane knows. Andy Cano knows. Objection, motion to strike. And just like that, the court swoops in and saves Mr. Khan and says the answer stricken is non-responsive. Because Erik just lists off a bunch of people he knows that know of the abuse. Maybe some of these people they are fighting for to testify because we still have a lot of battles ahead of us between the state and the defense when it comes to what evidence is going to be coming in. So yeah, the court says the answer is stricken, non-responsive. Just stick to the question being asked, not what other people say, might not say, or have said, or not have said in the past. Just stick to what your answer is. The witness says, I'm sorry, Your Honor. Mr. Khan says, if your father molested you for 12 years, why is it when you spoke to Dr. Oziel on the December 11th tape, you told Dr. Oziel, oh, I can't say whether I would have wanted another kind of father because I loved him and I missed him despite it, and I admired him and wanted him back. So maybe you could have like the exact same father, but a little less controlling and not abusive. You know what I mean? Like maybe that's the kind of father he would have liked instead of the one he got, but he doesn't know because it's all he knows. So how can you know if you're going to want something else? I mean, obviously, from hindsight, and we all know that, it would have been better to have not an abusive father, but Eric's is kind of like, well, it is what it is. Because I loved him and I missed him despite it and admired him and wanted him back. You wanted him back to molest you? That should be but an objection, but they don't. And the witness says, sorry, no, I wanted him back because of the pain I was living with myself of having done this and the fact that I had killed him. Well, the molestation would have continued if you hadn't shot him to death. Is that correct? I'm talking emotionally. At this point, I hated myself for what I did. And if we had been alive, that pain would go away. If he had been alive. That's what I'm referring to. And intellectually, what you are saying is inconsistent with someone who molested you for 12 years. Isn't that true, Mr. Menendez? Objection, argumentative, sustained. Do you recall later in the conversation with Dr. Oziel that day, Lyle Menendez said to Dr. Oziel, directing counsel's attention to page 30, line 21, and I still think mom's was a self-unaliving because feel that in her letters to Erik and I, she gave me the permission. Yes, sir. Did you feel Mr. Menendez, that you said responsible to kill your mother on August the 20th of 1989. My mother was not having ideations to take her own life in 1989. Did you stop your brother but bleh, did you stop your brother at this point and say, "That's not true. Our mom never gave us permission to kill her"? Well, that's a sentence you don't hear very often. Our mom never gave us permission to kill her, so we better not. Okay. Like you need permission. Mm. It was clear that it wasn't true, he says. Did you stop your brother at that point in the tape recorded conversation and tell your brother that's not true? Our mother didn't give us permission to kill her? No, sir. Do you recall in that conversation, Lyle Menendez also said, just sort of, she had given me permission to please Carrie out of her self-unaliving, and that it was obvious that she had decided in her own mind she wants to die. She can't do it. Yes, sir. And at that point in the conversation, did you ask your brother, why are you saying why are you saying these things? These things are not true. I felt I felt that he was worried of all the things I had just said when I was crying and slipping things out, and that he knew that and I knew that he was trying to sum up exactly what Dr. Oziel wanted because earlier in that tape sh- he had just said the opposite of what he was saying there. Uh-huh. And do you recall Lyle Menendez later in the conversation saying that? Well, Eric, I did it. I did took Eric and I, oh my God. Hmm. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm struggling to read this. We're almost done. I promise. Okay. Uh-huh. And do you recall Lyle Menendez later in the conversation saying that what Eric and I did took courage beyond belief, beyond strength. There was no way I was going to make a decision to kill my mother without Eric's consent. I didn't even want to influence him in that issue. I just let him sleep on it for a couple of days because I'm in a very good position to influence Eric in a lot of things because he knows that I care in a whole number of issues that I can talk eloquently or whatever. But when it came to that issue, I wanted nothing to do with it. I had to be, or it had to be on his own personal issue. If he felt the same, if he felt the same way I did about killing mom. Do you recall that in the conversation? I absolutely recall that. Okay, and you realize at this point that here is your brother in a tape recorded conversation saying that he gave you the days to sleep over the question of whether or not to kill your mother. Is that correct? Objection argumentative. Overruled. I knew exactly what he was talking about there, and I knew that he was referring to the conversation that he had had with me on Friday, on August 18th, where he told me that unless I could fire this gun at mom, what he had done better get out of his house and staying would be ridiculous, and that I was saying I didn't know, and he said, "Well, you better think about it." And I know on November 2nd that he used that and put it in the context of a mercy killing, and all came up on November 2nd when Dr. Oziel was trying to convince us of this theory and telling us that we were actually courageous in what we did because my mother wouldn't have wanted to live and she would have been happy that we had done this. Your brother Lyle was talking about a decision that he made to kill your mother, is that correct? Out of mercy. And what he said in this conversation was that he made that decision only with consent. Is that correct? Yes, sir. Hello. Sorry, I was trying to scroll and it wasn't scrolling. Um, and he said that he let you sleep on the decision for a couple of days before making the decision. Is that correct? That's what it says. And you understood that that's what he was talking about in that conversation. Is that correct? Objection vague as to understanding what he meant. Sustained. Did you understand that what he was saying in this conversation was that he let you sleep for a couple of days in the question as to whether or not to kill your mother? That was the mercy killing theory, says the witness. And what was, at least according to the way that he was describing it, a premeditated killing in which you had at least a couple of days to sleep on. Is that correct? That's what the theory of her wanting to live was. That's it. What it was. That is what it was. I'm asking you what your brother was saying on this tape. Yes, he did say that. Do you understand him to be saying that this was premeditated killing, that you had at least a couple of days to sleep on it? Yes. Did you say at that point, Lyle, we're going overboard here. You don't have to put in details like that about 2 days' work of premeditation. I knew that he was referring to a conversation I had had with him on Friday about not being able to fire his gun, and he said, "Well, you better think about that. Otherwise, we better get out of here." And I heard him saying on November 2nd and putting it into context of a mercy killing. My question to you is, did you tell him at that time that he was going overboard and supplying unnecessary details about a premeditation that never took place? All of these things had been discussed before. All of these things had been agreed with Dr. Oziel. Lyle was going overboard because it was crying at the time, and he worried I was going to say more things. That I was going to say more things. Was it agreed upon at the time? And by at the time you're referring to before the tape recordings was turned on, before any of the before any of the tape starting. Was it agreed upon at the time that sometimes in his conversation, Lyle was going to claim that he gave you a couple of days premeditate he gave you a couple of days to premeditate the killing of your parents? No. What was agreed upon was that the theory was that something along the lines of there was a decision that had to be made and had to be weighed, or whether or not mom really wanted to die, and how her suicide, ooh, I'm not supposed to say that word, sorry. How that self-unaliving depression culminated to a point where she no longer wanted to live. So there was no mention before the tape recording was turned on about him giving you a couple of days to sleep on it. Is that true? That was part of the theory. What he gave you, 2 days to sleep on it? That we spent days weighing the decision over whether or not mom wanted to die. Dr. Oziel said, "Well, when you turn on the tape recording, I want either you or your brother in some way that you took the day to think about this. Is this correct? What? Tape recording. Tape recording, I wanted either you or your brother in some way to say that you took those. Is that correct?" He says, "No, the specific words that he says never mattered." Okay, did you So he doesn't get that there are different brands, different things you got to do for different whatever. Eric responds, no, the specific words that he says never mattered. Well, how did that portion of the conversation come up, Mr. Menendez? Was there any discussion before you turned on the tape recording that Lyle Menendez was going to say he gave you a couple of days to think about premeditating the killing of your mother? Objection, it's vague and compound. Overruled. I don't remember whether that was part of the discussion on December 11th, as well as November 2nd, but before the tape recording, he once again ran through the theories and said just bring up experiences as I want it to documented I, as I want it documented as to why. And that's what we was discussed. The specifics. I didn't think that mattered. It didn't matter what he said. Mr. Khan says, Dr. Oziel just said bring up experiences. He wanted us to bring up the experiences, and that's why every single experience that he's talked about on that tape happens no later than 1987. Well, what type of incident did he ask you to bring up before the tape recorder was turned on? The fact how we feel about our mother killing herself now or how in 1986 we had tried to tell mom after her first attempt to take her own life that we would go with her, that we would leave dad and we would save her and that we loved her. And Lyle went and talked to her. I don't think she would have left Jose, to be quite honest. I don't think she would have left him. I think she would have stayed behind and chosen Jose. Like she would have chosen sides if it came to that. If it came to them or because she did. She absolutely did choose sides when it came to them or the brothers, the parents or the brothers, and they did eventually take sides. And Lyle went and talked to her and tried to get her to move away from dad and divorce dad. And when we tried to save her, the fact that we had found the different letters, her drinking, the drugs that she was taking, all of that pain involved. She was supposed to be the main focus because the reason why dad was killed and the mercy killing was always very unclear. Well, Mr. Menendez, you're telling us that there was no discussion about premeditation before the tape recording was turned on. Is that correct? I don't understand what you mean by that clearly. Clearly, mercy killing is premeditated. I'm asking you what was discussed. No, whether a mercy killing is premeditated or not. I don't. Well, let me finish the question. What I'm asking you is, did you have a discussion with your brother and Dr. Oziel that when you turned on, oh, okay, he was going to come sit on my lap. That when you turned on this tape recording, you're going to talk about how long you premeditated this killing. I don't remember those specific words. No, sir. Okay, so when Lyle Menendez, during the course of this discussion, started giving details like, well, I wasn't going to kill my mother without Eric's consent. I didn't want to influence him. I let him sleep on it for a couple of days. I could influence, but I didn't want to influence him on this. Did you say at that point that your brother Lyle, or to your brother Lyle, why are you going into these kinds of details? Dr. Oziel is not asking you to elaborate on days of premeditation. I was crying at that point. He's like, dude, I wasn't even paying attention. I mean, I was, but I was in my old world. So F off. At least that's what I would say. So you did not stop your brother at that point. I wouldn't have stopped him anyways. Did you think it was a good idea for your brother to be talking about giving you days to think about the premeditate the killing of your parents when in fact it was not even true? I went into this tape and the other tapes planning on lying. What did it matter what I said on the tape if it's not going to be the truth? It didn't matter to me what was said. Good point. You can make it up as you go along, since that's what Oziel's doing. So you had no problem with your brother in his tape recorded conversation talking about days of premeditation, which you now say was not true. Is that correct? Well, it isn't true, but whether he said it on the tape didn't matter to me so long as it satisfied Oziel. For him not wanting to go to the police, he would have said anything. Did it occur to you that your brother was not only giving him something to satisfy him, but he was apparently coming up with days of premeditation that Dr. Oziel wasn't even asking for? Those days had been discussed before. Days of premeditation are not discussed before you turned on the days. Allow me to finish the question. Days of premeditation was not discussed before you turned on the tape recording. Didn't you just finish telling us that? What I said is, I don't remember those specific words. It had been discussed that we had decided and had to delib- deliberate. We had to deliberate and think about whether or not mom wanted to die. And that was the theory. Isn't it true, Mr. Menendez, that you had no problem with your brother saying he gave you a couple of days to think about it because, in truth, you did have a couple of days about the killings of your parents and you planned it that way? Even if they did, and let's just say big freaking if, you still have to get to the reason as to why. Like, okay, I don't think, they didn't obviously plan it, but there are things within their case that could make it seem like they had because of the state twists everything as we see. So it's difficult to say that, the second time around they would get probably, all of this stuff, all this crap would still come in. Um, if they have, I mean, they're probably never going to get a new trial. If anything, they'd be released, in my opinion. Isn't it true, Mr. Menendez, that you had no problem with your brother saying he gave you a couple of days to think about it because, in truth, you did have days to think about the killings of your parents and you planned it that way? I don't understand your theory. Why would I have a problem with him saying that in any event then? Now, do you recall later in that conversation Lyle Menendez saying, redirecting counsel's attention to page 33, line 4, quote, getting back to what Erik was feeling, and I wanted to say that it would be great if we were able to work on it because even, our relationship, because even the planning out of this, the reason is it took such a short period of time to figure it out was one, because it could have happened at any moment. Now, now do you recall that? Whoops, I didn't mean to highlight that. Do you recall that? Not specifically, but if that's what it says, then that's what it says. When your brother began to tell Dr. Oziel that the planning of this took such a short period of time to figure out because it could have happened at any moment, and what did you think he was referring to there? Can you lay down, buddy? This dog, he has to lay down. Like he tries 3 or 4 different spots before he lays down and gets comfortable. This is what he does. But we also have a doggy door now, a screen door with a doggy door. My boyfriend is like the biggest genius and he made it and designed it himself. Like he bought a screen door and bought a doggy door, put it in. And so him and the 7-year-old dog Hazel that we have, they get to just walk back and forth in and out all day long when it's nice out and we don't have to have the air on with the heat. So, and it's been really nice out lately, so they've had a lot of days to do that, and he's really getting a routine now. Just FYI, he like every morning he's just like in and out and in and out. Like he'll come in, he'll after they eat their breakfast, and then he'll lay down on my lap, check in for like a minute, get back up, run back out there. Oh, I thought he was gonna get up again. He also when he goes to like lay down and settle down, it takes him like 3 or 4 different tries to get comfortable. So he moves a lot, like he wiggles in different spots. So seems like he's cozy now. Sorry, we are so close to the end. Let's continue. He did not recall that. When your brother began to tell Dr. Oziel that the planning of this took such a short period of time to figure out because it could have happened at any moment, what did you think he was referring to there? Objection would call for speculation and conclusion. Your opinion at that time that the statement was made. That's the question. Mr. Levin says, may he be confronted with the entire answer so he can see it? The court says, if he needs it. The witness says, yes, could I see it, please? Just tell me where. He reads something. Then he answers. He's referring to the fact that my mother was dying inside because my father, I think he said, was tormenting her and that her taking her own life could have happened at any moment. So the planning it out took a relatively short period of time. Doesn't even make sense, but okay. Mr. Khan says, the planning of what took a relatively short period of time? Objection calls for speculation, says Levin. Court says overruled. I don't remember him saying it at the time, says Erik. I just assumed that the planning of, because she wanted to take her own life, the planning of killing. The planning of your killing your parents, is that correct? Yes, sir. Okay, and you understood him to say that the planning of your killing your parents took such a short period of time because it was something that could have happened at any moment? Objection, it's vague. It says what it says. Overruled. No, that's not how I'm interpreting it. I'm interpreting it to my mother saying he's saying about my mother could have killed herself at any time and that's why. That's why it took such a short period of time. You're saying that because your mother could have killed herself at any moment, that therefore the planning of your killing your parents took a short period of time? Objection. It's relevant. He's not the declarant of the passage, says Mr. Levin. The court says rephrase the question. Rephrase the question as to his understanding of what was being said at the time. Mr. Khan says yes. At that time, as you were listening to your brother talk to Dr. Oziel, are you telling us that it was your understanding that what Lyle Menendez was saying was that because your mother's self unaliving could occur at any time, that therefore your killing your parents, the planning took a short period of time? Really long way to say that. I don't remember. I don't remember him saying it at that time. He just started talking about mercy killing and why killing her was a mercy. I'm talking about now, what it appears to be. There's just words, and what words he used didn't matter to me. Mr. Menendez, I'm asking you about your interpretation at the time. I don't remember him saying that. Mr. Levin says objection. He stated he had none. Overruled, says the court. Mr. Khan says, were you listening to your brother as he was talking to Dr. Oziel? I was crying in the chair next to him, and he was concerned about that and just wrapping up the mercy killing in a few. So, are you saying that when your brother said the planning of this, the reason it took such a short period of time to figure it out was because it could have planned, it could have happened at any moment? Was something you don't pick up as it was being said? Planning was part of the mercy killings, he said. Dr. Oziel said it. It didn't spark my mind. Mr. Khan says, objection, non responsive, of course, because it never like helps you. It's always converse to your opinion on something. So objection. Court says next question. The answer will stand. Mr. Khan says, yes. My question is, did you pick up at the time what he was saying? No. You did understand him at that time, did you not? Is that correct? I can't say whether I understood it or not. I don't remember him saying it specifically. Do you recall your brother saying during that same conversation, and we knew we felt and we knew everything about that had. Let me go back, strike that. Do you recall your brother saying immediately after the portion that I read you, going all the way to thinking beforehand? So here. Do you recall him saying that? Yeah, I do recall. And do you recall, was it your understanding at the time that he was saying to Dr. Oziel that this is killing, which you and what? People, okay. I hate this freaking transcript so much. There's never any punctuation. God, I hate it. Okay, I'm sorry. It's so hard to read, especially people talking is the worst. And then because you don't speak like a normal English, a proper English sentence, sometimes we speak in fragmented phrases and sometimes your words come out in a weird way, and I have to be the one reading it backwards in that weird way, and yeah. Or the court clerk writes everything in all caps and no punctuation like this transcript here. So, pardon me for being so horrible at reading these. It's because of many reasons I just said. And I just suck. Do you recall, was it your understanding at the time that he was saying to Dr. Oziel that this was a killing which you and he had thought out beforehand? No. What he's saying is all the thinking had been done over the years of mom wanting to kill herself, and that was clear that if that it wasn't something that even ended or that even needed to be discussed, that she clearly wanted to kill herself in 89. So apparently, even though he wasn't treating Kitty, he decided that he would diagnose her or whatever. So you're saying that he was referring to all of your mother's thinking was done beforehand? No, no. He's referring to Lyle and I, but in saying because she wanted to take her own life for so many years was already that it was already aware. It wasn't as though this is something new in our life. When he said all the thinking beforehand was done, really, really, what type of thinking did you think he was referring to? I don't know. He was referring to the killings of your parents, wasn't he? I think he was referring to the killing of my mother. That when he said what? Well, I forgot already. Oh well. And so you're saying that because you had known that your mother wanted to take her own life, that you had previously thought about killing your mother for some time before you killed her. No, no. Then what thinking was done beforehand? I don't know, sir. I guess I would have to see the entire sentence to tell you exactly. Stop feeding me one or two lines without context. I don't I don't know, sir. That was what the mercy killing was. I can't tell you why this particular sentiment was expressed. Do you recall that right after your brother said, quote, and we knew what we felt and we knew everything about that. And honestly, I never thought it would happen, even though I had thought about it, but it was done so quickly and so end quote. Mr. Levin says, objection with respect to counsel reading the next disputed passage. Ms. Abramson says, it's not disputed anymore. The court asks for the page number. Mr. Khan says, page 33, line 15. Court says, okay, that apparently has been resolved. So go ahead. Mr. Khan says, do you recall your brother saying, we knew what we felt and we knew everything about that? And honestly, I never thought it would happen. Even though I had thought about it, but it was it was done so quickly and so sort of carelessly almost because one we if you thought about it too much, the feelings of not having your parents around and so on would get in the way of what was more important, which was helping your mother, really. And thinking about that, feeling her, the feeling for her was so easy to separate yourself. I've done it for too long into my own life, and I don't want to deal mother's agony. And I, it was sort of a cowardice way out. And for one moment before I went back to school, I had a chance, even though my life was going really well, and to show courage, I felt, and help Eric and help my mother, and we got together. And it was the fact that we can't communicate, couldn't communicate together and sit down and face each other and talk about the real issues. And it was almost done looking in different directions. It was just a little word here and a little word and a little word here. Are there sort of thing, sorry, and their sort of thing doesn't, kill your parents based on a little word here and a little word there. It was obvious that we felt a tremendous amount of emotion. Do you recall your brother? He goes on even further, says the witness. Well, let me ask you about this before I move on. Now, specifically, but that was the sentiment that when I was telling or Dr. Oziel that I don't remember why I did say things, I was blocking uh, I was blocking it out, and he was saying one of the reasons you don't know why it is because there was no communication. And it was almost as though you guys just communicated with little words, and that's why you blocked it out. I just associated as part of the killing of the mercy killing. That's what he was describing. Mr. Menendez, when your brother said it was done so quickly and sort of carelessly almost because one, if you thought about it too much, the feelings of not having your parents around and so on would get in the way of what was more important. What did you think your brother was saying when he said that it was done carelessly almost? Objection calls for speculation and forming a conclusion. The court says your opinion at that time that the statement was made. Mr. Levin says objection assumes he had one. Court says, well, Mr. Levin says respectively to the court. The court says he can answer that question, whether he did or did not have one. The witness says, what I associated with this is you're saying you don't kill your parents, but if the emotion of that gets in the way when you would ignore the greater fact, that my mother's agony was going to be prolonged, and so that you had to kill your mother. He was saying it, I was crying. We wanted to get out of the session so that he was wrapping it up for Dr. Oziel. And that's probably why this tape was kept. Oh, he wanted to get out of the session, so he was wrapping it up for Oziel. And that's probably how the tape was kept. And so it was part of the mercy killing. And so it didn't matter what words he used or what phrases he couched it in. Just a mother was killed because of her agony and because she was asking to be killed was the theory. Mr. Khan says, my question to you, Mr. Menendez, is what did you think your brother was referring to when he said, if it was done carelessly, almost? It would be impossible to remember. So you don't recall what you were thinking at that point in time, is that correct? No, sir. Okay, do you recall your brother going on to say the following after he finished speaking about it? It took a tremendous amount of emotion Emotion, exactly the same emotion. And I just took a little word here and there, almost as if a third party was discussing it and was just a feeling of the minds. The time is now. It's not a great time. I'm doing well. You're ready to go to UCLA. We started to buy a lot of things, but we can't ignore the fact that my mother has to live with us, live with this. Do you recall that? I recall the meeting of minds because those are the exact words that Oziel used on November 2nd. And I do recall that the fact that he was walking or talking about, since there's no communication, it was almost as though you guys were communicating telepathically and soon. And that is that in terms of why my mother, or knowing that my mother wanted to die, even though she didn't ask us, or something along those lines. Okay, hold on. I thought we had a break. Let me check where our break was. I could have sworn it was like right around 120 something pages. Let me see. Whoops. I lied. I said we were almost done. We're not. I thought it was 125 pages. It's actually 150, and we're on 130. So we still have a little ways to go. So sorry about that. Did Dr. Oziel tell your brother in the November 2nd session that when we get together and record the session on December 11th, I want you, Lyle, to use the phrase, "It was just a meeting of the minds"? Before the tape was played, there were thousands of different phrases he could have used to express the exact same sentiment. I didn't think it mattered. I'm not asking what he could have used. What I'm asking you is in the November 2nd session, did he? No, sir. When he records this, he wants him to use that particular phrase. I don't know on November 2nd that Oziel was demanding a tape or he would go to the police. I didn't know that he was doing that on the November 2nd. So he did not use that phrase. Is that correct? He used the phrase. Objection vague. Who he's referring to. Sustained, the answer stricken. Did he ask your brother to use that phrase in the tape recorded session? We didn't know a tape recording was going to be made on December 11th. On November 2nd, so we couldn't have. Remember December 11th, did he ask your brother before he returned on the tape recorder to use that phrase? I don't understand what you're asking. Did Dr. Oziel specifically want us to say certain phrases? No. He just wanted us to express the sentiment of why he truly believed that he was killed. Was this truthful? That there was a meeting of the minds and that meeting of the minds led to the killing of your parents? It's absurd. So, did you stop your brother at that point in the conversation and say to your brother, "Why are you putting together a tape that makes it sound like premeditated murder?" We're back to this now, 2 hours later, and we're still back at this stupid question. It's so ridiculous. Maybe we ought to go talk to a lawyer like Jerry Chaliff first. We were in a difficult situation, and I could not do that. And bringing Jerry Chaliff into this was something that could not happen. And I've tried to say it 100 times. We had to make this tape. I went into it planning on lying, planning on giving the mercy killing theory. Dr. Oziel believed my mother was killed because he believed she wanted to take her own life, and it was a summing up of the end of the tape. Isn't it true, Mr. Menendez, that you gave this mercy killing theory on December 11th because you had not yet dreamed up this theory about your father molesting you or you being in fear of your father? No, sir. Absolutely not. Isn't it true that it was only after you had been in custody for some period of time that you came up with this whole theory about your father molesting you and killing him in fear? Sir, you have a letter from my brother that talks about the molestation right after yes or no, right after we were arrested that we cannot bring forward. Ooh, There's okay, I don't know, dog heard something. So anyways, there's apparently a letter from Lyle that they were not allowed to bring forward in trial because whatever reason, rules of evidence or whatnot, but they were not allowed to bring it in, and it has something to do with them talking about the molestation. But yet they're not allowed to bring it in. So that is why. Why is that? Why are we hiding so many things? Why is the state hiding so many things? Anyways, he motions to strike that non-responsive. The court strikes that and sustains the objection. The witness says no. You heard the testimony of Grant Walker, who saw you and your brother playing tennis on Saturday and being disrespectful towards your parents. Do you recall that? I recall it. I recall the testimony. Grant Walker was a pool repairman or pool maintenance man, something along those lines, and he was there doing his weekly maintenance, I think, or whatever maintenance that he had to do for the Menendez pool. And he claims that the brothers were very rude and disrespectful and mouthing off to Jose and Kitty. But anybody that knows the family or knew the family back then, you knew that they would not mouth off to Kitty and Jose because Jose wouldn't allow it. So you know that that's just a falsity. But that's what they got some guy to testify about that. And is that true? You were playing tennis on that Saturday and became respectful towards your parents? Don't you mean disrespectful? That incident never happened. I was not on the tennis court on Saturday, August 18th. Can you tell us who Ed Fenno is? Ed Fenno he was a student with Lyle at Princeton University who was a friend of my brother's. Did you have him over at your home from time to time? Yes. Did he stay at your home for a period of time? Yes, he did. How long did he stay at your home? He stayed at my home for a period of two months, and then another few weeks after that, October, November of 88. Do you recall having a dinner at your home in January of 1989 with Mr. Fenno, present, in which there was a discussion about going to Berkeley? I'm sorry, sir. I don't know what you're referring to. Was there a dinner at your home in January of 1989 in which you were present and Ed Fenno was present? I don't know. There may have been. Do you recall a conversation with your father, in which Ed Fenno was present, in which you discussed the fact that you had been accepted by Berkeley? I remember getting the acceptance at Berkeley, and my mother especially being extremely excited that I was accepted into Berkeley, and that it was decided that I would object as non-responsive. Motion to strike, says Mr. Khan. The court says, all right, the objection sustained, the answer stricken. The question has to do with you. Do you remember a dinner when he was present? I can't remember a specific dinner that this was discussed in front of him. But do you recall a discussion in the presence of Mr. Fenno? No. Do you recall any incident in which your father was present, Mr. Fenno was present, and there was a discussion concerning Berkeley? It's just too long ago. I don't recall. No. Do you recall telling Mr. Fenno, following a discussion with your father, that although you were accepted to Berkeley, you would prefer to go to UCLA because they had a good tennis team and maybe because your friends were local? No, that never took place. Objection with respect to what took place, says Mr. Levin. The witness says, 1, it's not true. Overruled. The witness continues, the facts aren't true. My friends were all going away to college. Some of my closer friends were going to be going to Berkeley. I don't remember ever saying that to him. Is it your testimony that to your knowledge that conversation never took place? Yes. Mr. Levin says, assumes there was a conversation. The court says you're asking whether or not the witness had the conversation with Mr. Fenno. Mr. Khan says, yes, Your Honor. All right, says the court. The witness says, I don't remember any, no. Mr. Khan says, now, do you recall telling Dr. Oziel something to the effect of your mother had locked the doors to the bedroom and that your parents had sensed that you and your brother were capable of murdering them? No, sir. Do you recall previously testifying that I said you told Dr. Oziel something like your mother had locked the doors to the bedroom and that your mother and father had sensed that you were capable of murdering them? I recall you bringing it up and us discussing it in a pretrial hearing, and I recall what it says is Dr. Oziel asked me the question. You asked about my mother locking the doors, and then in the same, if you could read the question, and then I said something like that, and I was referring to her locking the doors. Let me read it to you. Do you recall being, Mr. Levin says, page and line? Mr. Khan says, yes, this is volume 101, page 16188. I mean, sorry, 181. Court says, this is testimony from the first trial. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, says Mr. Khan. Mr. Levin says, you're starting at line 18, counsel? Starting at line 24. I would ask that we start at 18, where the inquiry begins, Your Honor. Okay, says the court. All right, says Mr. Khan. Do you recall being asked the following question and giving the following answer in the first trial? Question, Mr. Menendez, with respect to the October 31st, 1989 session, did you tell Dr. Oziel that you remembered that your mother locked the doors to the bedroom? I'll rephrase that, Your Honor. Ms. Abrams says, I'm sorry. Mr. Kuriyama then continues his question on, I don't know. He's still reading from the script, I think. On the November 2nd, 1989 session, or in that session, did you tell Dr. Oziel that your mother had locked the doors to the bedroom and that your mother and father had sensed that you were capable of murdering them? Answer, no, I said something like that, but I didn't say that. Do you recall giving that answer? Right. I was referring to my mother locking the doors, which is what I also told Mr. Kuriyama I discussed with Detective Zoller on the 17th, but I didn't say that. And I was referring to, obviously, I didn't tell Dr. Oziel that my mother sensed I was capable of murdering her. That would be impossible. Mr. Menendez, when Mr. Kuriyama rephrased his question and restated the question to refer to two things. Number one, your mother had locked the doors to the bedroom and that your mother and father had sensed that you were capable of murdering them. You didn't qualify that at the time of the first trial, did you? Objection, argumentative. He answered no. The court says overruled. Erik says, Mr. Kuriyama was focused on, he was giving me many questions throughout. Objection, non-responsive, motion to strike. All right, the answer is non-responsive. The question is, this is the court asking, as to the particular question, what was read to you, did you respond by asking for a clarification or anything of that nature? Mr. Levin says, Your Honor, respectfully, I object to the court's characterization. It was a compound question to begin with. The court says, the question has been read. It's been recorded. It's in the record. Did you ask for clarification or qualify in any way? The witness says, all right, Your Honor, no. Mr. Levin says, I would object. That's inappropriate. You can't ask for clarification of the witness. The court says, the witness can't? No, says Mr. Levin. Ms. Abrams says, I think the real objection is his answer in the record, as read, speaks for itself. The court says, that's your position, but now there's a question asked to the witness. The witness has a chance to say his position. Did you do anything to request to have it clarified? The witness says, I said something like that, but I didn't say that. Mr. Menendez, can you tell us when Mr. Kuriyama asked you if you told Dr. Oziel that your mother had locked the door to the bedroom and that your mother and father had sensed that you were capable of murdering them? Why you did not say to Mr. Kuriyama at the time, I never said anything to Dr. Oziel about my parents, sensing that I was capable of murdering them? Objection. It calls for speculation. The answer is what the answer is, Your Honor. The court says overruled. I believe I made that perfectly clear to Mr. Kuriyama, says Eric. I don't believe that he was confused by the answer. It was, you have to put in the context how the cross examination went and what he was focused on. And I believe what he was focused on the locking of the doors, which I did say something like that, but I told him before that question that I didn't say that. Mr. Khan asks, so you're saying that he was focused on the locking of the doors? Mr. Menendez, isn't it true that that was Mr. Kuriyama's first question following a recess? Objection, it's argumentative, says Mr. Levin. The court says rephrase the question. Mr. Menendez, do you remember that the very first question from Mr. Kuriyama following a recess was this question that we are now discussing? Objection, it's irrelevant. The witness says, what I mean by, the court says, wait, the objection is sustained. It really wouldn't mean that there wasn't a similar question before the recess. The answer is stricken. Mr. Khan says, okay. What do you recall was it that Mr. Kuriyama was asking you just before the recess? Objection, it's irrelevant. Overruled. Objection on 352 grounds. Overruled. I recall that that was like day 5 of cross examination, and I don't recall what he was saying just before the recess, but we were talking about Dr. Oziel, and if I, Mr. Levin interjects and says, objection, non responsive, beyond the scope. Mr. Levin objects with a non responsive. I recall that that day was like was day 5 of cross examination, and I don't recall what he was saying just before the recess, but we were talking about Dr. Oziel. Okay, so the discussion was on Oziel that day, apparently, too. I gave an answer that was misinterpreted, and to me, that I believe that my mother was the murdering part. I didn't mean to, and that's why I said something like that. But I didn't say that. I wasn't trying to convey, if I did, that I was signing on to the latter part, just the part that mom was locking her doors. Court says, your objection, Mr. Levin? Mr. Levin says, yes, Your Honor. To restate my objection, it's irrelevant. It's non-responsive. The court says, okay. The objection is sustained and the answer is stricken. Mr. Khan says, now, do you remember, Mr. Menendez, that just before the recess on that particular day? Objection. It's irrelevant, says Mr. Levin. The court says, okay. His answer didn't refer just to a recess, but the tenor of the examination by Mr. Kuriyama preceding that question, so perhaps you could rephrase it. Mr. Khan says, okay. Just before that recess, Mr. Kuriyama was asking you about statements that you had made to Dr. Oziel. Is that correct? Objection, it's irrelevant. Sustained to the form of the question. As I said, the defendant's answer, the witness's answer that came, caused this to arise, relates to the tenor of the examination of Mr. Kuriyama. Are we on a recess? Like what? I feel like we're at a sidebar, but we're not. I'm very confused what's happening here. Okay, the court says, where were we? Just before that recess, Mr. Kuriyama was asking statements to you about Dr. Oziel. We read that part. Okay. All right, here we are finally. Yeah, so this caused this to arise relates to the tenor of the examination, not specifically what occurred. Mr. Khan says, okay. Ms. Abramson says, Your Honor, we need to approach. The court says, okay, well, let's take a break here and we'll have the jury go into the room and we will have a little session with the lawyers and then take a recess. So let's take a little sidebar detour. We were going to stop here, but I'm going to keep reading. I don't think this is a very long sidebar, but we'll just get through it so we don't start with it for the next one. Um, all right, so sidebar here. The court says, okay, what is it that you are going to do, Mr. Khan? Mr. Khan says, I am going to be questioning him in regard to the escape plans. Counsel had previously indicated that he was the person referred to in the escape plans before they were redacted. So I want to ask him if he had any knowledge of that plan. Court says, well, again, this was a document prepared by the co-defendant and received only as to the co-defendant. So this is a Lyle document. It shouldn't be coming in for Erik. Mr. Khan says, although it was received at the only as to be for the co-defendant in the people's case in chief. However, now that this witness is on the stand, and because in light of counsel's arguments that he was the person who was being referred to in the document, being there being there were a couple of references to E and L, referring apparently to E and L, or Erik and Lyle Menendez, that this is going to be the one opportunity that the people are going to have to question the witness concerning whether or not he was part of that plan and whether he had any knowledge of that plan. Even if Lyle Menendez were to testify later, that still wouldn't give us an opportunity to cross examine this witness concerning the document. So, what I propose to do is simply questioned him in regards to the plan. If the witness denies that he was a part of the plan, and if he claims that he had no knowledge whatsoever of that document and no further evidence is presented concerning the document, then I agree it is something that is admissible only against Lyle Menendez and could continue to be so. However, if this witness acknowledges that he had some knowledge of the plans or that he is familiar with the documents in some way, or if Lyle Menendez were, for example, to take the stand and on cross examination of him, I am then able to question him concerning what the references to E and L are inside that document. Then at that point, I would argue that, and if he were to concede that that point that if he were to concede at that point that Erik Menendez was a part of that plan, then at that point it should be something that should be admissible against both Erik and Lyle. However, all I am saying is at this point in time, I simply want to question him in regard to the document, and there will be no prejudice to the defendant if he simply denies knowledge of the document, denies that he ever saw the document before, and no further evidence is presented concerning that document. It's not something that we would intend to argue to the jury he is lying. We will have to abide by the answer at the time that if he denies knowledge of the document and if he denies knowledge of the escape and no further evidence is presented, then we're stuck with that answer. So I don't think that the defendant will be prejudiced by that. So basically, what happened was there were some escape plans that were found. I think they were found in Erik's cell, but Lyle drew them up or something. And it was an escape plan. It was like a floor plan to escape. He was talking about changing identities and leaving the country, things like that. So there was talks of an escape, like escaping the charges. So that in and of itself is probably a crime, and or talking about it, conspiring to. So of course they're going to bring this up. This did not come in the first trial. So this is different than testimony that we heard in the first trial. So FYI. I don't remember where I left off. Oh yeah, the court. Did the defense wish to argue? Mr. Levin says, yes, Your Honor. One of the reasons that the prosecution was even allowed to conduct this joint trial was because they had agreed that they would redact from this document any reference to Erik Menendez. And so now what they wish to do is that what they wish to do is that which they obtained at great benefit before. We had always been seeking a severance in this trial, mainly because of this reason. But I have heard nothing that this witness has testified to in this trial that would make any reference to these documents relevant to him, especially in light of the fact that counsel can't prove anything with respect to this document that it has any relationship to Erik Menendez. So maybe it was found in Lyle's. I'm not sure about where it was found, but I could be wrong. It's the purest form of evidence, 1101. There has been no characterization of these documents as being plans to anything. I remember when Ms. Towery was arguing successfully to this court that the documents speak for themselves. And although counsel may, in fact, at some point in time characterize them as escape plans, certainly the jury has no knowledge as to what these documents are or what is encompassed in these documents. You see what he's trying to do? He's trying to get this in. Even though Lyle's not testifying, he's still trying to get it in through Erik, even though it's not a document that Erik, it's not for him. And they tried to separate the trials. The judge wouldn't have it. The prosecution wouldn't have it. So here we are. Now you've got evidence issues. But, Your Honor, all reference to Erik Menendez has been removed pursuant to court ruling prior to this document coming into evidence. And if the court is inclined to allow Erik Menendez even to testify to anything concerning these documents, we would at this time ask for severance and a mistrial. The court says, okay, as far as the reference to Ms. Towery, who has been noticeably silent during these proceedings, Mr. Levin says, under the circumstances, a brilliant move. The court says the court ruling had to do with characterization of the people who found the documents as to how they characterized them. All right. Ms. Towery says, well, Your Honor, Ms. Towery won't be silent in terms of this issue because we would object to Mr. Khan's characterizing the documents as well on the same grounds. The court did preclude the deputies who recovered the documents from Lyle Menendez's cell. Sorry, it was Lyle's. From Lyle's cell, from characterizing them as escape plans. And we would ask that if the court does permit questioning of Erik Menendez about these documents by Mr. Khan, that he be precluded from characterizing the documents in that fashion. Again, the documents do speak for themselves, and the perjury will be able to make the determination as to what the documents are. The jury, I'm sorry, the jury. Did I say the perjury? The jury will be able to make the determination as to what these documents are themselves at the appropriate time. Court says, all right, anything else? All right, bear in mind that this group of documents was recovered from the cell of Lyle Menendez, not Erik Menendez, and there has been no showing that the content of the documents or whatever they were intended to communicate were ever made known to the defendant Erik. They do have the potential of prejudice in that they, by their nature, indicate intent if one interprets them in that fashion, an intent to commit a crime, that is, escape from legal custody, and that is pursuant to the court's earlier rulings, in this case, only admissible as to the declarant, the person who wrote the document, Lyle Menendez, as to his state of mind, as to his mental state and consciousness of guilt, and not the state of mind of the person who might or might not have read it at some other time. Therefore, the objection is sustained. All right, let's take our break and give counsel and the witness a chance to rest, and we will resume at 5 minutes to the hour. Ms. Abramson says, Your Honor, perhaps we should inquire if Mr. Khan has any other areas, such as this one, where the court had held these things weren't admissible in their case in chief that he is planning to use. Mr. Khan says nothing right now arises. Who wants to bet he's going to do something like this again? Maybe not with Erik, but with somebody. Probably do it again. Ms. Erickson says, Can you think of anything else clever to do? Mr. Khan says, I'll work on that during recess. The court says, We'll take our recess. Recess is taken. So that is the morning of Monday, January 8th. Oh. It's spring, the doors open, they hear all barks, and they bark at like every little thing. So apologies. All right, that wraps up today's episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. The more and more that I read this trial, the more I wonder, why are we retrying people over and over again when we can't get it on the first try? I think there needs to be some kind of rule about that. I mean, I know there's double jeopardy, but that doesn't include people who get like a mistrial, like the Menendez brothers, who had a mistrial and then were convicted on their second trial. Could you imagine if Karen Reed had been convicted on the second trial and the jury just got it wrong because whatever reason? I mean, imagine that the trial didn't go as good as it did, as well as it did for Karen, and maybe, because Judge Cannoni made so many shit rulings that maybe some of that evidence that they wanted didn't come in. Maybe she ruled against ARCA. I don't know. She could have. She didn't. Thank goodness. But some of the judge rulings, I think, can really make or break a person's case. I really do, because all these little sidebars that they're doing, the Your Honor, can we please be heard on this? Like, come on, we're objecting to this, and you just keep ruling in favor of the defense or in favor of the prosecution, and we have like well thought out, cohesive arguments that make the most sense, and then you have the state who's not really making a great argument, but then you keep siding with the state. It makes no sense to me. So in these cases, I see that the judge has a lot of control over which way the trial goes because of how they rule on evidence. So we're going to keep an eye on this as we continue going forward. There's many more episodes to get through. Erik is still going to be on the stand for, I think, a couple days. So we have, I think I mentioned that at the beginning. So we will have just a couple more days of Erik on the stand. Thank you guys so much for watching. And I do hope that you hit that like, subscribe, and all the YouTube things. And I will see you guys in the next one. Take care. That's the end of this Trial Transcripts Exposed. Thanks for following along with me. Like if you want more, subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments below. See you next time.